Thank city employees for going above and beyond. And we're going to begin by inviting our city attorney to come forward. Tracy, would you please come forward? And we have some lawyers, paralegals, and support staff to thank. And here's the context, colleagues. For the last 5 years, the city has been a defendant in a case called Anderson versus the City of Portland. And at the heart of that case was a question of whether under our charter we could spend ratepayer dollars towards our portion of Superfund expenditures. It was an important issue, and it's a case that's taken a long time to get to trial. The case was tried over the holiday season, which meant a lot of our dedicated employees had to make alternate arrangements in order to represent us. The case was tried to a judge who then recently issued a ruling which was highly favorable to the city and validated what we've known for a long time, which is the city's been scrupulous in allocating general fund and ratepayer dollars towards our share of Superfund. We don't get enough opportunities to thank the folks in the legal department for their great work, and today we want to do that. So Tracy, if you could introduce us to the team, and we know one person couldn't be here, and then we'll have a chance to make some additional comments.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. With me today is David Landrum, who's one of the two trial attorneys in this case, and then Michelle, Tammy, and Pam, who are the paralegals and the legal assistant who did so much work on this case, which, as Commissioner Fish mentioned, went on in excess of 5 years and frankly is still going on. There are some additional remedy phases to address. I also want to mention Terry Thatcher, who prior to his retirement did a ton of work on this case, and most importantly, Karen Moynihan, who was the lead trial attorney on this case and was not able to be here today. And lastly, Louise Warshaw and Eileen Kelly were two other legal assistants who worked on this case a lot and weren't able to be here today.
Mayor, one other comment. Judge Bushong issued his decision the day before the EPA issued its record of decision. And so, and this was 2 weeks ago, and that was a big week for us. We had waited 16 years for a record of decision, which in plain English is the roadmap forward for the cleanup. But the Anderson case had been in the pipeline for a long time. And so it was extremely important to get a definitive court ruling on our right to continue to use ratepayer dollars towards our ratepayer share of Superfund, just as it was critically important that the Environmental Protection Agency put down its plan. And I know personally how disruptive this case has been to our team, particularly over the holiday season. And I'm very pleased today that we have a chance to say thank you for a job well done.
Thank you. May I make a comment? We want a big one here. Commissioner Fish, thank you so much for all your work over the past 5 years. I'm often glad that there's an attorney on the council, and this one is perhaps the one I'm most glad about, that you were very careful every step of the way and worked with our amazing team. So thank you to everybody. I really appreciate it.
I have to echo what Joe just said. If you're going to win one, it's good to win the big ones. So congratulations on that. Congratulations to you, Commissioner Fish.
Thanks to our crack team. Thank you.
I would also, at this time, like to make some acknowledgments for Portland City employees and others who really went beyond the call of duty over the course of the last 2 weeks. I think you've all noticed even the Weather Channel is starting to feel a little bit sorry for Portland, Oregon. We really did get hammered by this weather. I want to thank my fellow commissioners in particular for being very responsive and opening up the Portland building to people who lived on the streets and needed a warm, dry, and safe place to be. I want to thank the Fire Bureau and the Portland Bureau of Transportation, the transportation crews. Commissioner Saltzman, I know you worked tirelessly on this. Chief Mike Myers, Leah Treat from the Bureau of Transportation. The crews were out there 24/7, day after day after day, and I believe all of us in this community owe you and them a debt of gratitude. The Portland Police Bureau and Chief Mike Marshman, obviously the police and the fire worked overtime. They actually put extra capacity in place to go out and bring people who looked like they were in distress to the shelters. The Fire Bureau secured 2 vans that did nothing 24/7 except driving around, picking people up, moving supplies, moving shelter workers around. I really want to thank all of the first responders in this community for the outstanding work that they did. The Facilities Department doesn't often get the credit that they deserve, or OMF. Most people don't even know what OMF is, but their efforts were critical in keeping the Portland building operational. The Bureau of Emergency Communications, Director Lisa Turley, Commissioner Fritz, thank you for your efforts. That's a bureau that we know that they have a lot on their plate on a typical day. Over the last several weeks, they've had anything but typical days. They've risen to the occasion. The Bureau of Emergency Management, under the directorship of Carmen Merlo, has done a great job. Commissioner Fish, BES, Bureau of Environmental Services, the Water Bureau, Director Mike Jordan, Director Mike Steuer, all rose to the occasion, worked hard. They're still out there cleaning storm drains and making sure that our city stays dry. The Parks Commissioner Fritz, Director Abate, for their work in opening up Mount Scott and the Charles Jordan Community Centers. That was obviously extremely helpful. I want to acknowledge our colleagues on the other side of the river, Chair Deborah Kafori, the Board of County Commissioners, and the Joint Office for Homeless Services have just done a fantastic job. All the volunteers who took shifts at the Portland building, the East County building, or other shelters across the city, and all Portlanders, and this one is probably the most important, just ordinary Portlanders who took the time to check on their neighbors, to ask the people that they found on the streets if they were doing all right, and making sure that they got the help they needed. All the people who brought supplies to the shelters, TPI and George Devendorf, they stepped up. And of course, we know a lot of people spent a lot of time shoveling this week, and we're probably not done. It's still mid-January. I want to acknowledge the hard work of people who have done those things. So thank you to this community. I think you demonstrated that we are a resilient community and that we are a resilient government, and we're willing to work super hard to make sure, and particularly that the most vulnerable amongst us are not forgotten. Thank you.
May I just add to that? I think we're all very grateful for everything that folks have been doing. I had a volunteer put together an app, which is now posted on the front page of my website, to tell people in the community where you could take stuff to and where you could volunteer. I do also want to recognize the urban forestry staff in parks. They have, with all the trees that came down, amazing work that they've been putting in for the last 2 weeks. And also, I think maybe one of the most heartwarming ones, in the first days of the storm, we were trying to have a parks budget meeting, and Scotty Fairchild, who is one of our maintenance staff, laborers 483, came up to me and said, "Commissioner, I'm sorry that I can't stay for the budget meeting. I'm going to go out to the parks because we know where people have been hiding, and we need to go tell them how they can get to shelter." And it was just a miserable night, but that's the kind of extra effort that you just talked about, Mayor, and we do very much appreciate it.
Mayor, can I make a comment as well?
Yeah, please.
Just a public service announcement with respect to storm drains. The 3 biggest problems we have in a big storm at the Bureau of Environmental Services is clogged storm drains, which leads to flooding, the electrical shortages, which prevent pumps from working, and then the flow increase, which overwhelms our Columbia wastewater facility. And the one place where we ask our fellow citizens to help us is to keep storm drains clear. So if you have a storm drain in your neighborhood that's blocked by debris or ice, please help us keep it clear, because that's how we avoid flooding. And also, Mayor, the only person you left out on your list is you. And as someone that was homebound for a couple of days with a school-aged child, it was not lost on me that you were a very public face of our city during this crisis. So thank you for the leadership, the strong leadership that you brought during the management of this emergency.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a couple, with apology to Commissioner Fish. I think we forgot a couple people. I'd like to especially thank Mark Jolin, the initiative director at Home for Everyone, who's actually been working shifts in the middle of the night at our shelters and working through an illness himself. And I'd also like to acknowledge Kip Silverman, who's my Senior Technology Advisor for developing and rolling out an emergency shelter app in one day in conjunction with emergency services and technology services in 211. Our office saw a real problem with the advocates and the public having access to timely information about shelters around the city. So thank you, Kip, and everyone that worked on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Great. Thank you, everybody. We are now in session. This is the regular meeting of the Portland City Council. Communications are up first. Sue?
And I will now call the roll to
Oh,
Fritz.
I always forget that.
Fish.
Here.
Salzman.
Here.
Udaly. Wheeler.
Here.
And the first item is 31, request of Crystal Walensky to address council regarding happy birthday. Is Crystal here? (32) Request of Wayne Wignes to address council regarding illegal blocking of a public right-of-way under Burnside Bridge.
If you could state your name for the record, and just a reminder, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay. My name is Wayne Wignes. Until just a couple of months ago, the sidewalk underneath the Burnside Bridge had been blocked off with the use of caution tape since the summer of 2013. This is a time when Mayor Hales took it upon himself to tell people that they could not sleep in local doorways. I was sleeping under the bridge at this time, and I watched this cause a massive influx of people, more than could fit. And this right here caused the violence, not just allowing people to sleep there. A few years ago, a breakthrough international study was published on violence between chimpanzees. The reasons the study was such a big deal is that the parallel to human nature is clear. Chimpanzees are the only other hominid known to commit homicide besides us. In homeless crowds, this proves true. Fundamentally, there's not, what the study showed was that the violence increased not just with numbers, but more specifically with a decrease in availability of resources. In homeless crowds, this proves true. Fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with allowing a large body of people to congregate. It's just that if you take away their freedom and you make them fight for a place to sleep, then they just might do so. Now that sidewalk, that center sidewalk, used to be a place of refuge for strangers. We had a system in place. We were out of pedestrians' way. Central City would clean up in the morning, and there was less trash. Today, it's basically the opposite. You have a lot of small pockets of often degenerate and territorial groups who are obstructing a public max stop. It's trashy, and I don't even feel comfortable going down there. Recently, I obtained a copy of the lease agreement for that parking lot, and it showed that that center sidewalk is not included in the lease, and PBOT administers the public right-of-way, but PBOT did not have a permit on file, and neither is the use of caution tape permissible to them. In response, the U of O Foundation did take the tape down, but the cops are still applying the law in a subjective fashion on behalf of the U of O Foundation. The lease stipulates that the city need only vote to take the parking lot away from them. We don't need to spend so much on shuffling the issue around when a diamond in the rough is right underneath our noses. The Burnside Bridge offers overhead protection from the rain, it's centralized next to resources, and if that parking lot or at least a sidewalk adjacent to it were to again be utilized, it could accommodate a lot of people in a way that is unobtrusive and inoffensive to pedestrians. And when you have this, then you have an environment where the two can interact. And when you have that, understanding rather than resentment grows. Without that, your job as mayor is going to be impossible. Now, this is the same company who tried to change the OMF sign back in 2008. The Made in Oregon sign back in 2008, and it begins to seem that they will do whatever they can get away with. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next item, please.
Next, 33, request of Sarah Hobbs to address council regarding quickly fix Vista Bridge suicide prevention barrier.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Sarah Hobbs and Commissioner Saltzman. Since I signed up for this, I have gotten a status report on the status of the repairs to the West Rail suicide means deterrent. So I know where it is. They have brought to my attention that your office is aware of what has happened there, and I will be very much in contact with your point people on this. The Vista Bridge Suicide Means Reduction Project was very personal to me, and hopefully I can tell you this without getting emotional. In 2005, if it were not for a last-minute realization, I did not want my children's last memory of me being that I had leapt from the bridge and died on Jefferson Street, I would not be here today. So that when I heard that there was that accident to put that 30-yard hole in that middle of the West Rail barrier, I was frantic, but it is a work in progress. In 2015, the Portland Police Bureau's Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team responded to 1,200 suicide crisis calls. I am still trying to get the breakdown of how many of those calls were high-risk calls, but I can tell you a high-risk call involving a firearm that had a very tragic ending for everyone involved happened directly across the street from where I live in November of 2015. I know the three of you are very aware of this story. I would love Mayor and Commissioner Daly to have this discussion with you. In conversations with people in the know, while the Unity Center will relieve a lot of the burden for long-term follow-up from the Behavioral Health Unit, it will not remove responsibility for suicide response. We need, as a city, to start having these discussions by pawning it off to the county. And I'm running out of time, but I tell you, I want to follow up with you on this. I was a volunteer with the Oregon State chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I am
Very much.
here to help you, but I need to have these conversations with you. You were right, Commissioner Daly, when you told me we do need to start changing the conversations we are having around suicide, but we need to start having the conversations to be able to do that.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
will be back.
Sarah, we appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you for being here. Sue, next item, please.
Next item, 34, request of Michael Withy to address council regarding affordable micro-housing and homeless villages.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Mike Withy. I'm here this morning representing Micro Community Concepts, a nonprofit here in Portland, Oregon. We concentrate on the tiny house movement and all the facets of that. And real quickly, I'd just like to explain what that is. The tiny house movement and today's tiny house movement is a tiny house on a trailer. It's built, stick-built strong on a trailer. Unfortunately, they're still illegal here in Portland, Oregon, which is amazing because Portland, Oregon is world-renowned as a leader of the tiny house movement. Another part of the tiny house movement are ADUs, accessory dwelling units built on the ground in backyards or a converted garage. We also have micro-housing as part of the tiny house movement. We've designed micro-communities that were kind of popular a couple years ago with the last mayor especially, but we found a way to go ahead and build them through the private sector and then sell them to the city much less of a cost than what it would cost you to build it. So hopefully with this bond that went through, we should be able to build a couple micro communities and supply them for affordable housing. And then we have sort of, I guess you call them intentional communities as part of the tiny house movement, because most of the intentional communities do have a factor of tiny house living in them. It could be condo homes, it could be. So you could have an intentional community that could be built specifically for seniors, for people that are disabled, and we're actually doing that around the country. We probably should catch up a little bit. And then another part of the tiny house movement has to do with tiny houses for the homeless. And that is also catching on big time, not just here in Portland, but throughout the country. We go throughout the country and speak on the benefits of all these tiny house parts of the tiny house movement, but what's catching on quick are the tiny houses for the homeless because it's a much less expensive way to get folks in. Example, Buddy Clark Commons, even though I do love the building, I love the concept, it was great, but if we look at the cost, $2,500 per tiny house is what the last mayor paid POD to build these tiny houses. $2,500 as compared to $250,000, let's say, for a studio. That's 100 times the people we could get off the street. So we really need to look at the tiny house movement in all of its glory, not just ADUs, not just tiny houses on wheels, which we should add to this new zoning proposal to make them legal, to say, hey, we could consider this an ADU if it has skirting, if you take it off the wheels, whatever we need to do to make them legal here in Portland. Also, finally, I am a little concerned about the tiny house movement for the homeless, only because not just things have gone awry or off track, but we could do a lot better job by saying, listen, you have a certain amount of time to be there. You can't be there for 10 years. You need a caseworker. You should be from that section. You have to work with your neighborhood association, good neighbor policies. So even though the new one going in Kenton is beautiful, we need a citywide policy for all of the tiny house communities for the homeless so that we have some consistency. And that's about it.
Michael, can I just make one observation? Thank you for your work, not only in micro-housing, but in flagging innovative ways to bring the cost down of affordable housing. Those are two vitally important things. The one thing, though, that I'm going to just gently push back is when we invest in affordable housing with services, we build apartments, and then we have meeting spaces, and we have on-site healthcare clinics, and we have other things. So if we divide the units by the total cost of the building, we have a very misleading number of the cost per unit.
You know, I got that from the
Please,
Portland
please.
Tribune, so I
No.
digress.
And of course, the media never
Right.
is infallible. But the Bud Clark Commons, as you know, because you and I spent a lot of time there, has a lot of services. It serves hungry people. It has shelter spaces. It has showers. It has places that people get referrals and the like. So to take the units and divide by the cost of the building is a highly misleading number. And if we continue down that path, then we won't be winning the argument as to why we place services on site. And in my view, particularly for the people that we lost over the last 2 weeks, we've learned something very powerful. And we lost a fellow citizen who died in the shadow of a shelter that had capacity. And here's what we learned. That person is not going to go into a shelter for a whole host of reasons. That person would have been alive today if they had a home and we provided services. That's called supportive housing. And it tends to be a little more expensive because you have to marry a home and the services to stabilize someone's life. And that's where I'll be making a push through this budget. But again, with Bud Clark Commons, unless we divide the whole building by the units, we're getting a very misleading figure.
I understand, and thank you for making that point. I'll make a counterpoint, which is the Henry Building, which is $1,000 a square foot to rehab. We can build brand-new apartments up for $100 a square foot. Why would we spend $1,000 a square foot to rehab the Henry Building, which we just
So
did?
I hate to be the heavy here, but this is communication, so if we want to have further policy
Anyway, thank you.
discussions, we'll have that opportunity to do so. Clerk, if you could call the next item, please.
35, request of Stan Herman to address council to review and respond to being in violation of ORS 830.035. Is Stan here? He did ask to reschedule.
Okay. Next item, Sue.
Request, this is number 36, request of Brainerd Brower to address council regarding ingrained cultural systemic entrenchment.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, thank you.
You could state your name for the record, please.
Brainerd Brower.
Thank
The words cultural systemic entrenchment are not my words, but those of City of Portland employees who know the system. As background, I believe in building codes, community ordinances, and have every wish to do the right thing. My property is one of the best kept properties in my community, and have always taken great pride of ownership. A quick background is that my home was reviewed during some permits in 2002 by the City of Portland Planning and Design to be in fact a duplex. About 2 years ago, a tenant used the complaint system after vacating to fake a smoke detector violation to get out of paying for some damage and back rent. This is a topic of its own, but not why I'm before you. As a result, Ed Maryhart in charge at the time, against the urging of the inspector, reversed the determination from 2002 of my home being a duplex and put my home into violation status as an illegal duplex. A few months later, at a landlord training course, Ed Merryhart said, and I quote, "We actually have more power than the police do," end quote. It is systemic that the enforcement branch is more powerful than the planning and design branch, with clear intimidation from one branch to the other. It is fair to say that there is power that perhaps goes beyond the police. Since my fines are now almost $20,000, risking me losing my home, no due process and no available system of constructive, solution-oriented focus. We are a great city, which I love. The stress and criminal feelings are significant for an individual like myself, who does not even have a traffic ticket on record. More recently, Mike Leafield has looked this over and stated that he is not worried about the fines, but that they can only go away after I start over with a permit process, resulting in no flexibility for past over current codes. Mike Leafield has also been kind enough to investigate and figure out that in 2002, the city relied on county records for the determination, which it no longer relies on, resulting in my situation. This is compounded by missing records on my home and a refusal to admit the obvious. There are so many well-intentioned, nice people in the city and working for the city who have tried to help, but limited by their specialty. I have learned that my situation is not unique, a large reason why I'm here, and perhaps sealing my own fate by taking on power. Some people in my situation may have legitimately violated some ordinances, and clearly there are needs for enforcement measures. Even in these situations, the city of Portland needs to put power, and perhaps the abuse of power, aside and work diligently towards constructive and meaningful solutions.
Thank you. If you
Please.
could wrap it up, please.
Yeah, please. Please, I ask you, let's have pride in doing what is fair and right for a livable city, and especially for a citizen. Please offer a point person to facilitate solutions, who is not intimidated by the divide in the ingrained cultural systemic entrenchment of power.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony.
Mr. Brower, could I ask you to please contact my office since we now have BDS in our portfolio?
Oh, yes,
Yeah, Marshall Runkle is my liaison.
Marshall Runkle. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Item 37, request of Joe Walsh to address council regarding communication.
Good morning, sir.
For the record, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. First, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for having all 10 people in communications. It indicates that you have an interest in hearing from the citizens of Portland, something that we haven't felt in a long time. So it's not a bad beginning. It's a good way of doing it, and those small things are very important. Today, I could waste my time trying to convince the majority of this council that we need to do more concerning the question of houselessness in this city and county. I could yell and jump up and down about your lack of planning for the winter, but I will not. I could point out that we warn you of this coming disaster. We may have 5 to 7 deaths, so far as we have been told. I could stand up and be called out of order and get thrown out, something that I have done. At least one of you find that behavior is something out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So we may have a Nurse Ratched with us today. What I have decided to do in my few minutes is to warn you of the political tsunami that is called the Trump regime. 2 days from now, we will swear in what one of my heroes, Congressman John Lewis, called an illegitimate president, and the dismantling of many of our programs and things we hold dear will begin. If we do not figure out a way to come together, we will perish. All of us have to lay down our hostilities towards each other. All of us. It's going to be hard, very hard for me. It's going to be hard for you. These are the people that we murdered by neglect. Sleep is now hard to experience as I spend my nights asking why we don't do better. Frozen on our streets alone, crying out, and we did not hear them. Mark E. Johnson, 52. Karen L. Bates, 50. David Cruro, 68. Zachary Young, 29. The infant that doesn't have a name, that the mother was walking in the streets and nobody noticed. Nobody noticed. 60,000 people in the city, nobody noticed. I don't know what to say to you anymore.
Joe, and I'm sorry if I could ask you to wrap it up.
I know, but let me wrap it up. I don't know what to say to you anymore. I've jumped up and down. I've been arrested. I spent time in jail. Not for me, but for these people that are on the street mostly. You were not prepared for this. The three of you that sit here, not the two new people, the mayor and Chloe, but you three. We begged you. We asked. We jumped up and down. We got arrested. We shut you down.
I'm going to have to ask you to
And
wrap
you did nothing.
All right, thank you, Joe. Clerk, could you call the next item, please?
I know I'm disrupting your meeting and people dying. Which one do you want to talk about?
There,
Would you please have a special meeting to talk about what you did not do and stop patting yourselves
Joe.
on the back?
I can talk to you after the meeting. I'm happy to meet with you, but could we call the next
I don't
item,
want
please?
talk. I want you to do something. Really do something. He wants to spend more money on buildings.
Right.
He's an idiot.
The longer we're sitting here talking, the less time we're doing. Could you please call the next item? Thank you. It's all right. It's okay.
38,
I apologize to this group.
Thank you, Joe.
request of Stephen Entwistle to address council regarding celebrating the spirit of activism. Is Mr. Entwistle here?
Joe, you dropped something, sir.
39, request of Charles Ormsby to address council regarding Bureau of Environmental Services, Terwilliger Boulevard Sewer and Tryon Creek Treatment Plant projects. Mr. Ormsby has rescheduled. And item 40, request of Carl Wickman to address council regarding celebration of Portland's only covered bridge, Cedar Crossing. He is also rescheduled.
All right, clerk, if we could, Sue, if we could go to the consent agenda. It's my understanding item 44 has already been pulled. Are there any other items that have been pulled from the consent agenda?
I do not have any others.
So item 44 is pulled. Otherwise, could we ask you, Sue, to call the roll on the consent agenda?
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaley. Wheeler.
Aye. And why don't we then, we have a time certain at 9:40. Why don't we take care of 44? And then go into the two time certain items, since we've reached the trigger for both of those, then go into the regular agenda.
Item 44, authorize a special appropriation grant agreement with Street Roots in an amount not to exceed $62,887 to expand its sales area on Portland's east side and increase support and opportunities to its vendors.
Is there any testimony on this item? If you could please state your name for the record.
Super Watchdog PDX. One of the reasons why I pulled this item is that one of the concerns I have when grants are being given from the city to various nonprofits is sometimes in the grant agreements, they want good PR, obviously, to the city. And what I want to make it very clear is when we're dealing with the press, and we're dealing with freedom of press, freedom of speech, when we're doing public communication, I don't want a grant being given to somebody and then having a restriction in the grant that says, we really want you to say good things about us. I mean, this is the press. I want them to say good and bad. And they should have the right to do that, still receive the grant, and not feel as though in the future they won't continue to receive the grant for their good work that they do in the community, which I agree they do, and also working with the homeless, providing them additional sources of income and work, which I think is very beneficial. I just wanted to make it very clear, sometimes when grants are given, there are statements in these grants that want good PR to the city, and when we're dealing with a publication here, I want that to be removed. I want them to have the right to say, I may not like what this commissioner is doing, and I'm going to put it in my publication. I may not like their final decision they made on some of these issues. I'm going to put it in my publication, and I really hope that won't stop you from giving me the grant next year. And they shouldn't even have to worry about that because the commissioners need to remain viewpoint neutral, content neutral, allow freedom of press, allow freedom of speech. Another issue I had on this application, as I noticed, maybe I read this wrong, but on Article 1, it said, grantee agrees to implement the development of the James Beard Public Market described in Attachment A, and that is on page 2 of 9. I don't feel that really even fits into this. I'm just bringing that to your attention that I review all these agreements. I go over everything as a watchdog. I did notice that. That's a concern to me being in this grant application. Other than that, again, like I say, I commend Street Roots on their work, and I commend you and do agree with you being approved for this grant without the limitation of you being able to put down the commissioners or the mayor in your publication, and feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lightning, where is that limitation?
Yes, sir. That would be on the PR, which would be, let me get to this real fast. Okay, it would follow under the publicity.
On the second, 2 of 9, Article 2.
That is correct.
Article 3.
Under publicity. And what I want to just have it made very clear, and in some of these grants also, is that as a publication, they should have a right to freedom of press and to state what they want, even if it's going to be negative toward the city, toward the grant, toward anything. And I don't want that limitation put in due to the fact they are the press. And that's just my position on this grant. Now, if they weren't the press, I might not say that. But being the press, I want them to have that independent freedom to really say what they want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm Shedrick J. Wilkins, and I have a tendency, well, I took economics classes at Portland State University, that there's a public sector and there's a private sector. I'll compliment Willamette Week, like Lightning's trying to say, because it can say whatever it wants. It gets raunchy, and you won't get that out of the Oregonian. And so, but I do believe that Street Roots should function by itself. There's no need to give it any money or any grants for anything. I agree with Commissioner Fish that if you really are homeless, you should go to the Bud Clark Commons or the Sisters of the Road Cafe and be with other homeless people and figure out what to do. My opinion that Street Roots is more poetry. It's and it doesn't need any money from the city. And you know, I don't like the idea that somehow Street Roots is some way to get valuable information to homeless people, that is not a good argument. So I don't know why the public sector is involved with the thing.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. And this is a complex issue. It's easy to be of two minds of it. On one hand, street routes is great, and the people distributing street routes are extremely marginalized, extremely oppressed people, and I want as little strings as possible on anything that helps those people. On the other hand, we know that marginalized and oppressed people that have very low incomes, including people that work with Albertina, are actual clients, service workers of Albertina Kerr and of Goodwill, are often victims of the very system that helped them. So while you're planning this investment in street routes, I hope that all you commissioners will have whatever conversations you're able to have with yourselves and especially with the public to learn about people who are in such dire situations and unable to get really good traction with public service agencies that the only income they have is maybe not even their EBT card. And when you get EBT SNAP, you have no money to buy clean underwear or hygiene items. And those people can't remain forever dependent. That's psychologically damaging. So in addition to approving this grant with Street Routes, I hope that there will be money as you work with the county on the Joint Office of Homeless Services to track the ability of people that want to at Street Routes, connect with vocational rehab, move into PHC and other full-time independent granting work. Not a pressure system where people that feel afraid to affiliate with Street Routes because they're going to be drug into a system they don't want to participate in, but so that people are doing Street Routes, have enhanced connectivity with the state VR system, with PHC. If they're eligible and comfortable with PHC or Albertina Kerr, then that should be open to them. But, you know, there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. So when we invest in Street Routes, we actually want to invest in great outcomes and maximum independency, new word, maximum independence and self-sufficiency for people who are Street Routes vendors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. For the record again, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. When I saw this item, I was really taken back because I love street routes. I really do. I think the articles are really good articles, and the vendors on the street, we always tried to give them a couple extra dollars for coffee when we buy street routes. So we're very aware of the newspaper, and as you heard, we're all seem to be in support of it. However, it took me by surprise. This is a newspaper, all right? We don't take any money in Individuals for Justice from anybody. We really don't. Not county, not state, not feds. And the reason we don't do that is we want to be able to tell you to go to hell. We want to be able to say to you, you screwed up. We want to be able to say, and sometimes we've done it, and curse at you and get thrown out. How do I do that if you give me a grant? I mean, I do not aggravate my wife Patty because she's got the money. I do not aggravate her. It seems to me
Wise man.
that this is a bad idea on its basis, to have a newspaper getting funding from a city that it spends a lot of its time criticizing. So what happens? Recently, there was an article, and at the end of the article, the public broadcasting system that did the article said that Bayer did not want to point fingers. That was the end of the article. What does that say if they take grants? Have you ever seen me not point fingers? I do your names. I point fingers straight at you because I don't take any money. So our concern is somehow you have to insulate that newspaper and tell them either in writing or in action that if they get up here and say you're a bunch of bums, you're not going to take their grant back. Okay? Or you're not going to not give them the grant next time around. It's a problem. And you don't have the solution yet. Find a solution for this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
My name is Wayne Wigness. I just briefly wanted to make a comment that about 5 companies, national media companies, now own what 50 used to own, I believe, back in the 1950s. So this monopolization of the media industry is definitely a problem. Studies have shown that people are surprisingly not swayed by their position. Their thinking is not swayed by what the media reports, but what they give thought to has been shown to be swayed by what media report. And so when it comes to homelessness, you can see how this could be a problem. For example, I had no idea that the Harbor of Hope project, what progress is still being made on it, until the Northwest Examiner reported last week that what's going on with it. And they pointed out that the other media industry papers, that they're ignoring it. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any further comment on the city council? Otherwise, Commissioner Saltzman, sir.
I guess I am struck by the reference to the James Beard Public Market. It seems totally out of place in this agreement, so I would move to strike Article 1.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Could you tell me where that is, please?
Article 1, page 2.
Yeah, Article 1, page 2.
So I second it, and my guess, colleagues, since we've already adopted the special appropriation list, my guess is that this is a Scrivener's error, since this has nothing to do. So we're just, the amendment would be to attach the right scope of work to this. It has the correct scope of work. It would just be to modify Article 1 so it refers to the proper exhibit, and which has nothing to do with James Beard Public Market. So I second the motion.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Sue, can you call the roll on the amendment?
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. To the main motion, can you call the roll?
Fritz.
Well, this was one of the special appropriations. As you may remember, last budget, we set aside $1 million and invited anybody who wished to do so to submit a grant application, and then a committee of all 5 of the council offices staff made those selections. So this is one of these. I think this discussion, we've lost the fact that this is to help Street Routes expand to the east side and increase support and opportunities. And we actually have a proud tradition of funding people and things that disagree with the council. I think Gretchen Kafori once said that the neighborhood associations are in some ways paid to tell us we're wrong. So I know that Israel Bayer would not have applied for this grant if he thought that it would in any way compromise his journalistic integrity, and I'm very proud to support Street Routes. Aye.
Fish.
Mayor, we've revamped our special appropriation process in part to respond to an audit that was released and some concerns we had with the community. And I think it is now a better, more democratic process. I enthusiastically support this particular appropriation. And just a couple pieces of context. We have a proud tradition, as Commissioner Fritz alludes to, of supporting organizations like Street Routes. In fact, one of the cornerstones of our collective efforts to address homelessness is that we fund the Rose City Resource Guide, which is a publication of Street Routes and something dates back, I think, to the Eric Sten days, and we're very proud of that relationship. Also, I think something that's lost in this is if you look at the impact statement, we're reminded that Street Routes is at its core a nonprofit that helps people experiencing homelessness, many of whom are experiencing poverty, mental and physical disabilities, create opportunity for themselves, which is why all of us buy Street Routes, which is why during this storm, a number of us bought more than one copy and sometimes actually paid more than the face value for Street Routes, because we're supporting people in their desire to be self-sufficient. And finally, on the question of their editorial independence, I don't think either Joanne or Israel or any of the award-winning reporters have to worry about editorial independence. They take us to task on a regular basis on homelessness, affordable housing, Superfund, equity. And I would hope that that proud tradition continues, whether we fund them or not. Aye.
Hoffman.
Aye.
Daly.
I'd just like to add that I heard your concerns. I don't feel that Article 3 publicity would in any way hinder Street Roots' ability to report freely and criticize us. It's common practice for a grant giver to expect some kind of acknowledgement from a grantee. This is certainly not an order for them to give us free, sparkling publicity. So, aye.
Wheeler.
I don't think they can be bought for the price of this grant.
Yeah.
Aye. The grant is approved. I understand Mr. Herman has shown up, so Sue, if you wouldn't mind going back to communications with the forbearance of my colleagues to allow Mr. Herman his 3 minutes.
Actually, I had a notice from one of the staff that I wasn't going to be rescheduled till February. So I brought the email with me, but I went on the computer and found out that my name was on there today. So I'm really not prepared. If I'd come in next week, that would be good, if that's,
I'm sure we can accommodate that if that would be your preference.
okay. Thank you. See you next week.
Yeah, sorry about the confusion. I apologize. Back to the time certain issues on the regular agenda. If you could call item 41.
Item 41, accept the residential demolition ordinance implementation report from the Bureau of Development Services and Development Review Advisory Committee.
Commissioner Udaly.
Mayor, this is my first item, and it was in the pipeline before I assumed my seat or took on the Bureau. I want to thank you for the assignment. The more I dig into the work of BDS, the more I see how vital it is to a lot of my personal areas of concern. So I am going to turn this over to, I believe, Nancy, to give the report.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. It's nice to meet you. I'm Nancy Thorington with the Bureau of Development Services. I'm a Senior Code and Policy Analyst, and I drafted the ordinance with the help of the Development Review Advisory Committee, or DRAC, and this is Jeff Fish. I'll let you introduce yourself, Jeff.
Jeff Fish, Fish Construction. I chaired the demolition ordinance during the period of working with the public on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know how much the mayor and Commissioner Udaly know about the background of this, but basically what happened was we had a previous version of the ordinance that had notice provisions that were not working very well, and then there was an exception in there that was called like the one-for-one exception for the demolition ordinance that allowed somebody who came in for a demolition permit to avoid any notice or demolition delay if they came in simultaneously with a permit for a replacement structure. So that it caused problems on both sides. So there was a report that was done by the Historic Review, no, what are they called? The Historic Landmarks Commission, sorry. And so they asked that those provisions be looked at. So the council gave us that direction, and we met for about a year and a half with the DRAC subcommittee, and then came to the council with an ordinance that changed those provisions. And as part of that ordinance, there was direction from the council to come back in 18 months and report on how it was going. And that's basically what this is. This is that implementation report. So we have this first slide here is just a general overview of what the provisions were. Basically, it did two things. It changed the residential demolition delay requirements, and then it added a new category of permit for major alterations and additions. Those are referred to in a lot of the materials as MRAAs. And the reason why we added this category was there was some concern with some of the demolitions being what they call, or work being done was essentially virtual demolitions where the only thing left was like one wall. And so there was no notice to the neighbors that something like that was happening. So we added that category. For the demolition delay requirements, we made some really big changes in the notification. So the previous notice only required one of those big, notice of intent to demolish forms being posted on the property itself, and then notice to the neighborhood organizations in that area. The notice changes, provisions change so that now all properties within 150 feet get mailed notice. And there's also mailed notice in addition to those recognized organizations, also to the Architectural Heritage Center and Restore Oregon. Thank you, Commissioner Fitz, for that addition. And then we also added door hangers to the surrounding properties no less than 5 days before the demolition, because one of the big concerns with the demolitions was the hazardous materials that could potentially get put off during a demolition. So now all residential structures in areas that are within the residential comp plan map designation as residences are subject to a 35-day delay. And then there's also a possibility for a 60-day extension if an appeal is filed. And I'll go through the appeal things in a minute. We also added a definition of demolition to the code. That seems really simple, but there was no definition anywhere. There wasn't, not in the state building codes, not in our codes, nowhere. So it made it a lot easier, so we were all talking about the same thing. And then this last piece, we added a certification regarding asbestos and lead-based paint. Now, that's not in the ordinance, but BDS added that. We met with the agencies, the state agencies that regulate those. BDS has absolutely no control over that. That's not part of what we do. We're not hazardous material experts, and it's not, we have no jurisdiction over it. But we met with DEQ and Oregon Health Authority, the Contractors Board, and other stakeholders to come up with this document that basically anybody who's doing a residential demolition or a major alteration has to sign this document that says, I'm aware that there are regulations, they may apply, and I've complied with anything that does apply. It doesn't give them any authority or right to sue or any of those kinds of things. What it does do is if one of the regulatory agencies does want to, start an action, they have some evidence that the person knew about the regulation. So that's its function. That's the best we could do given the fact that we don't actually have any jurisdiction there.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Absolutely.
And I'm delighted that you've added that, and I hope at some point council discusses of the broader question of whether those are disclosures that should be made at the time the house is sold as well. But my question to you is, while we can't mandate compliance with another set of regulations, is the statement that we're going to ask people to certify subject to some penalty if someone makes a false statement to us?
Not enforcement by us. It's only subject to enforcement by the agency that regulates it. And the way it works is...
I understand.
Oh, sure.
I want to preserve your time here. Since this is a report and the commissioner in charge is not coming back with code for a few months, what I would just ask you to look at, just consider, maybe get the legal opinion. Again, since we're bootstrapping here and we're requiring that someone say that they're aware of an obligation and that they're going to comply with whatever their legal obligations are, I would love to know whether we have the right to hold them to some legal standard in terms of a false statement to a government, and whether that gives us a hook independent of actually enforcing the state or federal environmental regulation.
Okay. Let me just ask, in the 18 months since we put that rule in place, have we had any complaints from community members that there's been a problem even though the developer has signed the agreement?
Yeah, we've had a couple of complaints, and still the issue is very frustrating for the community right now because we don't have the authority, but we're the ones that issue the demolition permit. So they look to us, but we can't do anything, other than, provide the information and, say, here's who you can contact. But it is very frustrating. Just as a point of information, DEQ handles asbestos, but actually with demolitions, residential demolitions, there are no regulations for lead-based paint. It only applies to the renovations. It's crazy. The legislature is considering taking that up in this current legislative session. I've worked with Senator Dumbro and a few others. I know it's crazy out here. The look on your face, it is. It's nuts, but there's nothing there. So we can't, no agency has the ability to enforce anything at the moment on a residential demolition.
Could somebody remind me, is that on our legislative?
It isn't yet, but isn't it fortunate that we had to delay the adoption of
I have
that?
a feeling it's going to be added.
Yeah, and
Yeah, for sure.
but with asbestos, that has been, the state does have authority. Do we know if any demolitions have had a complaint about asbestos to the DEQ or the OHA?
Yes, I've heard complaints. Basically, what happened, and this will be in one of the other slides, but I'll address it at this point. With the asbestos, in I think it was 2015 legislative cycle, they adopted SB 705, which now requires that anybody doing a residential demolition has to have an asbestos survey done. And currently that's all that's required. We actually asked DEQ in the implementing regs to include a requirement that report be produced to the local jurisdiction, and they didn't want to do that because they were concerned about some of the smaller jurisdictions. So hopefully, if in the current legislative session they do introduce something, they are considering allowing local jurisdictions to adopt local regulations to require that. We're in kind of a touchy situation because we're one of the few agencies, BDS, that's actually regulated by another agency. So we're regulated by the Building Codes Division, and so we can't do certain things. That's why our hands are so tied on some of these things.
Can I come back to that point just for a sec? 'Cause
Sure, absolutely.
This has been enormously eye-opening for me.
Uh-huh.
That's why, because we don't know what we don't know, and because we know that both DEQ and OHA are overwhelmed in terms of doing their oversight, that's why I'd like to see some consequence to a disclosure that we later find was not honored. So saying you know you have a legal obligation, saying you're going to follow it, then later skipping, let's say, an asbestos survey, or knowingly using one of these firms that's substandard or what have you, then gives us an independent hook because they've made a representation to us as local government. The other thing I just want to highlight from my colleagues, and I'm sure Commissioner Fritz will put the lead-based paint issue on our agenda for tomorrow. In all of the tests that have been done by the Multnomah County Health Officer, at the request of some family that wanted their child tested for the potential for lead poisoning, in all of them, the investigations have gone back and found in the cases where the child had an elevated level, that it was either some kind of fixture in the home, lead in a water teapot, lead in something that the child was using, or lead paint, overwhelmingly lead paint. And in none of the instances where the investigations have been done has it traced back to lead in the water. So we know that lead paint is the principal source of lead risks in the home. We're going to have to update our laws in terms of regulating lead paint generally, particularly in homes in substandard buildings. But this is, again, a critical issue where I would be reluctant to defer just to the state, the other regulators, because they're swamped and they don't have the capacity right now to enforce the law. I'd want to come up with something where there's a disclosure and some teeth if that disclosure proves to be misleading or false.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the, again, going back to the constraints that BDS has, we, our inspectors basically look at the building, the structure as it's being built, not as it's being torn down. We don't have expertise in hazardous materials. Typically, a jurisdiction that would regulate that would have, an air quality board, water quality board. Those would be the agencies that would look at these issues and, would have the staff and expertise to do that. And that's a key component that's missing if that's the, direction the council decides to go. Okay, so these are some of the points with the demolition delay, the extension that can go for 35 days, and then an extra 60-day extension with the submittal of an appeal. And that goes to the code hearings officer with an appeal fee or an appeal fee waiver. And they have to produce documentation showing that they're actively pursuing an alternative to demolition. The appeal process was one of the big additions to this ordinance because it allowed, now it allows anybody, it used to just be the recognized organizations that could request an appeal. Now anyone can do it, and it goes to the code hearings officer, and there are some other additions to this. It also puts the burden on the appealing party because under the old ordinance, it was actually on the property owner to show that the appellant wasn't pursuing an alternative to demolition. And they have to show basically a plan that has, here's our budget, here's what we're planning to do to try and purchase this site or to otherwise save it, move it. They have to contact the property owner and show what significance it has to the neighborhood. These are the numbers. So from April 30th or 20th of 2015, which is when the ordinance took effect, until the end of October of 2016, there were 562 demolition permits that were subject to the ordinance and 65 that were not. The 65, most of those were, they were not within a residential comprehensive plan map area, or they were subject to the Title 33 120-day delay because they're historic. And these are the rough implementation costs of this. The staff, this only captures the permitting services tech time that's specifically dedicated to the demolition ordinance implementation. It doesn't capture, like my time or inspectors or plan reviewers' times on this. And so that's $194,000 for one FTE, and then it takes about 45 minutes per application for a Tech 2. And then the printing costs of about $15,000, and then the appeal fees. The way the appeal fees work is the code hearings office charges about $1,300 per appeal, and there can be a waiver if the appeal is filed by the recognized organization. So there were 12 appeals since the ordinance took effect, and of those, 10 took advantage of the fee waiver, and so the city pays that cost.
Under what circumstances would the city not waive the fee?
If the appeal is brought by an individual and not a recognized organization.
So effectively, is there any fee for a recognized organization, or effectively is there none?
It has to be the recognized organization whose boundaries include the site. So if you're in one area, if you're a recognized organization in one area of the city, you can't file an appeal in another area of the city.
Okay, so it's a geographical requirement.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then, so this is kind of a snapshot of what worked. Now, all of the demolitions are subject to the notice and delay, except for nuisance properties or anything that's subject to the zoning code delay. And then we added the major alteration and addition provisions. The outreach, we did a lot of outreach. Myself and a couple of other staff members went to neighborhood association meetings. We held a lunch and learn. We did a lot of different things to get the information out to the community about the appeal process, and worked on getting forms and other outreach materials. The notice provisions have really proved to be very effective. We've, neighbors now know, because what was happening was, somebody would go off to work and then come home, and the house next door was gone by the time they came home. They didn't have any time not only to kind of emotionally prepare for the fact that this house was going to be gone, but, cover their car or, make sure their windows were closed if it was a hot day. So that's really helped a lot in that regard. And then the appeal process itself has really, for the most part, worked very smoothly. I'll go into some of the things we do want to tweak. And then BDS staff created these implementation guides that were pretty effective in terms of kind of fleshing out the ordinance itself, because as an ordinance we weren't trying to anticipate every possible scenario, and so these guides have really done that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We want to actually use those and as building blocks to creating some admin rules. So some of the things that didn't work in the appeal process, basically whoever appeals, they're getting an extension of 60 days for a total of 95 days to try and save the structure. But there's no incentive. One of the biggest complaints, not only by the appellants but by the code hearing officer, was that they didn't have any incentive for the property owner to negotiate. And so we want to take a look at if there's some way to, make that happen. There's a term in the ordinance. It calls for having a pro forma budget. We put that in there based on United Neighbors for Reform. They asked us to put that in there. But everybody, including the code hearings officer, is, what's a pro forma budget? So we'll probably recommend, changing that just to a budget or, something. And then who has the authority to negotiate any kind of purchase? That's been kind of difficult, because sometimes you get these properties that are in escrow. And so technically it's owned by the current owner, but then you have the future owner who's actually the one doing the demolition. And so there's a little bit of confusion about, how do you handle situations like that? So we want to take a look at that. One of the issues that the code hearings officer mentioned was he was struggling with how people demonstrate significance to the neighborhood. He applied that pretty loosely. I mean, it's like my grandmother baked cookies there, was almost as broad as it could be. So he asked us to take a look and see if we could make those criteria a little easier for them to apply. But we'll talk to the DRAC subcommittee about that, because we were trying to keep some of those balances happening.
How many appeals were there?
There were 12. And then one of the other really big difficult issues was when the plan to save the structure had to be consummated, because that's the word that's in the ordinance. It says it has to have, be reasonably able to be consummated within the 95 days. And so the question came about, does that mean that escrow has to close, or that the house has to be moved, or, that the deal has to be complete, or that escrow has to be opened, or that an agreement signed? So we want to kind of look and see if we can find a good way to make that clearer what that means, so that everybody's a little can apply it better. One of the issues that came up was when you go to move a structure, it can't actually be done. The permits can't even be obtained in that 95-day period. So that was a problem.
So did any of the 12 result in potentially saving the house?
I think one did that we know of. I mean, part of the problem is, once the appeal is done, we're out of it. So if they negotiated something, we wouldn't necessarily know that. But and then, in some of the cases, they went in and they looked at it, and they said, yeah, no, this really is, it's going to take too much to bring it up, so they just let it go. And then one of the other issues that the code hearings officer brought up is whether evidence could be submitted at the hearing, because a full packet has to have, the budget and the plan and all those things, but that has to be done within the first 35 days, and sometimes you don't have all the information, so they might want to supplement that with more information on how they're planning to, raise the funds or something like that. So
So who is BDS working to resolve these issues?
Yes, yeah, so basically, this is a report. The demolition subcommittee will meet again after this. We wanted to get a little bit of feedback from you on a couple of issues so that we can then come back with actual code language proposals. for
Great,
you.
thank you. So you expect to come back to us with these issues resolved?
Exactly.
Or draft language?
Exactly,
Good,
yes,
thank you.
And then there were,
There's more.
I'm sorry?
There's more, sorry.
Oh,
I
I'm
see the
sorry.
second page.
Yeah, what didn't work, again, some of the equity issues, those were always there, but it really highlighted the problem with equity in that basically of those 12, the ones that got saved or the ones where the appeals were granted, they were all in wealthier neighborhoods where people could afford to buy the house outright. And the ones that were denied, except for one that was appealed late, were all in more modest neighborhoods where they couldn't come up with a plan, with enough money. And then some of the issues with the scope of the demolition notice that we want to address, whether it needs to be expanded, and then this one here, the application of the ordinance to all residential structures. I'm going to go to the next slide. What happened was, as I was mentioning, BDS is subject to regulation by the Building Codes Division, and so we can't enact anything that's already in the building code, that's already covered by the building code. So for years and years, since this ordinance has been in place since the 90s and before, there's nothing in the building code for residential demolitions, but there was for commercial, which means, anything over three units.
Could I get a time check? I note that
Yeah, sure.
30 minutes was requested for this presentation. I just want to see where we are.
Let me just get through, this is one of the slides that is important to getting your feedback, and then I'll go to the other one, and then, the
Thank
rest
you.
of it's fine. So this is an issue, we always assumed that it applied to 1 and 2 family, but now the state building code does, essentially allow us to regulate commercial demolitions, and we have our definition of residential structure in our code includes multifamily, and so we want to narrow it back down to the 1 and 2 family. We already did the hazardous materials.
I do have a question
Sure,
about
yeah.
that. That's the one item that stood out to me the most in the report. The original intent of this ordinance was to protect housing, and why draw the distinction between single family and multifamily?
Only in this ordinance. Now, if the council wants to look at multifamily, then we would recommend a different group to look at it, because basically we had, people like Jeff here who's, they do single family, the Home Builders Association, that sort of thing. And, if you look at the notice provisions, how do you put a door hanger on a high rise? They just weren't crafted with commercial zones in mind. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And then the other issue that came up was, right now it is only in the residential zones. There's been talk about whether we should expand that, and again, we don't recommend doing that unless there's a different group that's convened and we look at how that would work, because the current ordinance as it's written was written with 1 and 2 family in mind. And then I think, again, we plan to create administrative rules. I don't think all of those have been, so basically the next steps at this point is to get your feedback. If you're okay with us going back and amending it to limit it to 1 and 2 family, at least for now. If you want us to come back and do something different, certainly, we would be glad to do that with the right people in the room. And then retain the current language that limits it to the residential comprehensive plan map areas. And then we'll reconvene the subcommittee to look at these, and then come back to you with the code changes. Any questions?
Any further conversation before I ask for a motion to accept the report?
I think that's my question.
Oh, good point. right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public testimony on this issue, Sue?
Can I make some comments?
Oh, yes, sir, please.
Jeff Fish, Fish Construction Northwest. I more want to answer some things that were said by the council. In your question about why was single-family taken on, when I was chair of DRAC, it came to DRAC that United Neighbors for Reform and some other people were concerned about single-family homes were being torn down in different neighborhoods. So really, that's where the focus came from the public. Getting back to Commissioner Fritz's and Commissioner Fish's discussion on asbestos and lead, that is something our industry, my side of the industry, has a hard time understanding, much less the regulators. When I demolish a structure, I have to do a asbestos check on that. I provide that to my excavator. My excavator has to have that when he goes and takes the materials to dump, or the recycle center, wherever he goes. He has to have that report. So, and there's teeth in that. I can't remember if the fine's $10,000 or it's $15,000 if you're trying to get rid of asbestos and not doing it correctly. So, in my opinion, that has a lot of teeth in it. When you get to the lead thing, as Nancy said, we've been in a couple of meetings together where we've had 5 state agencies in there, everybody pointing fingers at each other saying, no, that's yours, that's yours, that's yours. Nobody knows what's going on. I'm also on the deconstruction committee, and we had a meeting, what was that, 10 days ago, I guess, about 10 days ago. I recently, about a month ago, tore down a home in which had lead in the paint around the windows and in the bars rafters. I went online to the state certified deconstruction people, or excuse me, the lead abatement people, and found a guy, had him come out and look at my lead. He says, yeah, you've got about $5,000 worth of lead that we could abate here, but he says, why do you want to spend the money? And I said, what do you mean? He says, you fall inside of what's called a T-clip. That's an acronym. You can tear the house down because you don't have enough lead in the percentage of the materials there in the house. I made mention at the meeting and got taken to task by Multnomah County because Multnomah County said I should have called them and asked them about it instead of calling somebody certified. So there's a ton of confusion, especially on lead in the industry.
Can I just make a comment, Mayor? Jeff Fish is no relation to me.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
But,
Somebody beat me to the punch.
but he is a very successful builder, and he's a very responsible builder. And he serves on a lot of committees, and he has helped us get things right. He doesn't always agree with where the council lands, but he's a good citizen who's engaged. We don't develop regulations because we're worried about Jeff Fish. We develop regulations because we're worried about people that are cut corners and are needlessly putting neighbors at risk. We wish everyone operated at your standards, but clearly that's not the case, and so that's why we have to regulate. And on the question of who's on first, the mayor used to work in Salem, and so he's familiar with this question of turf and jurisdiction. And I think we've now heard this, Mayor, so many times that it's time to really resolve this question because the public really doesn't care about our challenges of figuring out who's on first. They just expect that we're looking out for their safety. And I think this is one where we ought to just work with our state and federal partners and get it right and err on the side of public safety.
Well, as is always the case, Commissioner, the brunt of any lack of communication is felt at the local level. So in a sense, we have an higher obligation to make sure that we're creating a responsive process. And I appreciate what Commissioner Fish said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue, is there anybody signed up for public testimony?
We have 2 requests.
Good.
Charles Bridge Crane Johnson and Sarah Long, please come up.
Charles has asked me to speak first. My name is Sarah Long. Is there anything else I'm supposed to say, like my address
That's
or
it?
anything?
Nope,
Okay.
that's good. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, I don't know why either of the two people who were up here speaking to you were actually here. Jeff Fish is on a lot of committees, yes. He actually shouldn't be on any. Nancy Thornton should not be an employee of the city of Portland. I have an email here I wrote 2 years ago to the city. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. Regarding Nancy Thornton. On multiple occasions, I and others witnessed Nancy Thornton, a Bureau of Development Services code and policy analyst and licensed attorney in the state of Oregon, act in bad faith while performing her duties as an employee of BDS. She told falsehoods and spread misinformation.
I'm sorry. Could you keep your testimony pertinent to the ordinance and to the report that we're discussing today? If you want to talk about an HR issue, I'm happy to meet with you later to talk about that separately, but we're really focused on this ordinance.
Sure. Let's do that then, because neither Jeff Fish nor Nancy Thornton should be testifying or giving reports to you guys, period. So that's all I have to say then.
Fair enough. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. As you know, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson, much better than tower cranes. But what happens is we're getting to a point where affordable single-family homes, with or without lead and asbestos in them, get knocked down, and sometimes tower cranes show up in residential neighborhoods. Right now, Montevilla, a friend of mine, the house beside her, not a tower crane, only like a 3-story, no, I think they approved it up to 5, monstrosity. But despite the very serious concerns about Ms. Thornton that have been raised, you do need to listen to one thing she said, and that was the equity problem. In this report, we did start to get the glimmer and the touch on, but one thing that we need to do is stop demolishing Portland, especially demolishing it in a way that makes it impossible for us to maintain the number of entry-level, first-time owner, average income homes. And I know that's a little bit beyond the scope of maybe the technical language of this letter, or this ordinance. But I think that there was some effort, and you as elected officials, even though sometimes large amounts of money can be involved in your campaigning, and we've made some great progress on that, thanks Amanda. What's great about Portland is the average people. And they never get accolades, Dyke Dames, Homer Williams, the other Mr. Fish. They're in positions where they do things with high price tags and, occasionally get notoriety. But with this ordinance, it's important not just the letter of the changes you get, but that people know that the commissioners here have a spirit of protecting average Portlanders so that if we do fail to save an average income single-family dwelling, we know that you've got systems in place that it won't be the only hope that average working people's only hope for a house will be Habitat for Humanity. And to do that, as you mentioned among yourselves, you talked about the legislative agenda. In a perfect world, we always get sold this bill of goods that state preemptions are great floors, but they never work out that way for the city of Portland. They always end up to be crappy low ceilings. And when you're working tomorrow in the future on the legislative agenda, you need to, on this issue and others, find ways to work with the great ones, Denbrough, Frederick, Kotek, to untie your hands so that here in Portland, where we have resources, we can manage environmental pollution. And also what we heard was that because little towns around the state are scared that they don't have the resources to face some of their pollution issues, they'll just let their people get poisoned. We have a very challenging budget coming up. You bailed at the right time for the state budget.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
But let's work strongly with all the legislators, even Republicans and East Oregonian state legislators, so that people are protected from pollution that happens when residential structures release their toxins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog PDX. One of the concerns I have on the demolitions is also looking in the area of the foreclosures. And as you know, a lot of the nuisance liens, and we heard a gentleman earlier talk about liens being put on his home, but I'm talking actual vacant homes out there that have had a tremendous amount of nuisance liens put on the properties. They end up going into foreclosures. The current owners lose pretty much all their equity. And a lot of these homes are already determined to be demolished right from the get-go. And what we need to do is we need to put a safeguard into these properties that state that we would like these properties to be purchased by somebody that does want to pretty much just rehab the property and not demolish it. And one of the reasons these foreclosures take place is that we need to have enough people send information in the community about the sale itself. So what we're actually doing, instead of Mr. Fish, the developer here, which I have respect for him doing what he's doing, and I think there's a purpose in the community for what he is doing on demolitions and building new homes. But also, if we can get more people in the sales pool, that will put the people who want to see these homes rehabbed, restored, and kept in their communities for various reasons, because they like the home to be there. They don't want to see it torn down. We get more people stepping up to the table and being able to bid on these homes, not just the developers, but we have the people out in the community. The neighborhood associations can join together. They can purchase these homes if they want to. They can purchase these foreclosures and rehab them and keep them the way they currently are and fix them up. And the reality is that if you don't get enough of those groups together, they will outnumber the developers. I'm sorry to say this to the developers. And they have the ability to come in with more money at the end of the day when there are large groups of people that do not want these homes to be demolished. And if you can negotiate with these groups to have an understanding that it's advantageous to do this in your neighborhoods, if you like these homes there, you can also create rentals in the neighborhoods, rehabbed, fixed up, have good neighbors in these homes. There's no reason to demolish these homes, and every developer will say this. They have a certain profit they have to build into these properties. Normally, groups of people that come in with money will pay higher than these developers will for these properties, and they'll look elsewhere. And there's plenty of other places to look too, so they're not going to lose. But it has to be more of a community involvement and more people stepping up to the bidding process to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else signed up for Joe, you'd like to come up, or anybody else?
I didn't sign up.
That's fine. Coming up, sir.
For the record, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. I just have a question. If we could use as a wedge to put all demolitions, just stop them, and use that as a wedge for something that we wanted. For instance, trying to figure out the huge rent increases in the apartments from the developers, those kinds of things. I don't know if it's legal or not, but what the heck, you got 40 attorneys, somebody could figure it out. And just say to the people that are doing the demolitions, and my hunch is that they're connected somehow to the developers, and say to them, look, we have this huge problem. We say we can't cap the rents because of state laws. Even though I disagree with that, you should challenge it. You could use this as a wedge. We're not going to do any more demolitions until you guys figure out what's going on with these rents. All right? We're just going to stop all of them. I think you have the legal right to do that. And I'm not suggesting you do it. I'm just suggesting you gamble a little bit. What do you have to lose? You say to these guys, because we have to figure something out. We're all trying to figure something out about these rents. And everybody kept saying, oh, we can't do that. Well, let's find out stuff that we can do. And I think you can use this as a wedge and say, you want demolition? Okay, guys. about this new project that's going on. How do we do maybe a dozen apartments that are low income? How do we do that? And let them do it. If you ask people how to do this stuff, they usually figure it out. So anyway, it's just a suggestion. I don't have any great objections to you blowing things up or demolishing really nice houses for something that's ugly. However, use it as a wedge if you can.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who'd like to testify on this matter? Commissioner Fish?
I move that we accept the report.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Sue, could you please call the roll?
Fritz.
Thank you very much, Nancy Thornton and your team, for coming back with this summary after 18 months. It was one of the things I was most happy to work on when I was in charge of development services in response to community members. And the fact that we do not have 20 people showing up here from United Neighbourhoods from Reform tells me that we've got at least part of it right. I do appreciate especially that the notification part is working so that people can at the very least cover their cars and close their windows. We're not allowed to have a moratorium by state land use law, so we already know that. I personally am not interested in doing things just to try. If we know that they're not allowed, I'd much rather look at what can we do, which is what we did with the deconstruction ordinance. And what I'd like to see us do is to work some more to see how that's going fairly quickly so that we could perhaps make it not just for 100-year-old houses, but for anything with a lesser time frame as well. I suspect that we're going to see a diminishment of demolitions in this calendar year because the comprehensive plan that we've just worked so hard on goes into effect next year. And with that and the infill projects, I believe there'll be a lot of incentives for more infill, which would make it less likely that developers would demolish this year when they could get so much more next year. So that just gives us time to work with Planning Bureau and with Development Services in seeing what else could we do before we give all those giveaways. So thank you very much for the report. Thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for your stewardship at the Bureau. Aye.
Fish.
Thanks for an excellent presentation. Nancy, thank you for your good work. Jeff, thanks for the work that you and your son-in-law do in serving in committees and in making sure that we have the benefit of your perspective even when we disagree on policies. And to our newest colleague, Commissioner Udaley, the Portland Water Bureau is very interested in this issue about lead paint, both in terms of abatement, but also in the context of demolition. So we are eager to work with you as you develop code and come back to council. Congratulations on your first item. Aye.
Saltzman.
Great report. Appreciate all the hard work and the questions you've posed for us. I'm not sure we gave you all the guidance you're looking for today, but we do appreciate you digging in the weeds on this. And thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for shepherding this project to us today. Aye.
Udaley.
I feel like I'm getting a little more credit than I deserve since I wasn't. I think you had more to do with it than I did. Nancy, thank you for the report. I do have some remaining questions, and I'm sure we'll be having lots of conversations between now and when we finalize this in code. I share Commissioner Fritz's hope that we can expand the deconstruction deconstructions to include more houses. I've supported that ordinance, and I just look forward to working with you more in the future. Aye.
Wheeler.
I greatly appreciate this report, and Commissioner Udaley, take the credit when you can, because you'll certainly get the heat, some of which you're not, shouldn't be taking the credit for either. And I want to thank the three members of the City Council who've worked very hard on this. I think this was a great report, and I particularly like the way that you highlighted what yet needs to be done. It was worth the price of admission this morning to understand that we have a long way to go when it comes to the lead abatement piece in particular. And I share Commissioner Fish's belief that we as a city council need to be in the leaders. We need to take a leadership role there. I do also assume you'll be walking the floor and talking with us each individually or our offices individually to get the feedback you need to move forward. So with that, aye. The report is accepted. Clerk, if you could read item 42.
So not to bridge right the next item, I'd like to approach the microphone with a very serious matter now.
No, I'm sorry. I would be happy to meet with you right after the city council session.
Everybody
but
needs to hear this.
When
I leave here
there's
today-
lots of things people need to hear, sir.
Okay, you guys need to hear this real quick. When I leave here today, I will be going with a large group of citizens. We will be taking the back doors off of buildings today, and we'll be moving the people and the women that are falling through the wraparound services in this city. So I just want you guys to know, I love you guys being on council. I love you sitting closer. I love you still being awake this late. I came to tell you guys, in 2017, this world is too crazy for me to sit here while babies are dying in our streets.
We agree.
So I just want you guys to know, I want Dirk to know, I want all these reporters to know, I want the nice security guard and the mean security guard to both know that we are going to take at least 3 houses this weekend. So figure out where your police officer is the best.
So I'm happy to meet with you later to discuss this, but we have a whole room full of people who have signed up to be heard, and you are walking on their right to speak. If you wouldn't mind, clerk, if you could call item 42. And I'm happy to meet with you later, Jesse. You know I am. Item 42.
Item 42, Portland Water Bureau 2016 Customer Survey Results.
Mayor and colleagues, as you know, the Portland Water Bureau delivers clean, safe, and reliable water to almost 1 million people in the region every day. And I want to do, while Mike's here, I want to do a special shout out to the teams that worked round the clock to address the challenges during the severe weather emergency. And that includes a huge spike in calls for service when homeowners and folks need help with frozen pipes and also with main breaks. And Mike, thanks to your team for their public service during this severe weather crisis. The team at the Bureau is also dedicated to delivering the highest level of service to our customers. And to better understand how we are meeting our standards, last summer the Bureau partnered with Portland State University to design and conduct a customer survey. Here to present on the results of the survey are Director Mike Stewart and Deputy Director Gabe Solmer. And I don't want to steal their thunder, but when you hear the data, it will not come as a surprise to you, colleagues, that the 3 most important values identified by our customers are safety, quality, and reliability. And with that, Mike, take it away.
Joe Daly, welcome. With me at the table is Gabe Solmer, the Deputy Director of the Water Bureau, and Jessica Letney, Senior Management Analyst who worked on this survey. I'd also like to thank our PSU partner in this exercise, Dr. Debbie Elliott. Dr. Elliott is the Director of the Survey Research Lab at Portland State. She's a research associate there and also works with the Regional Research Institute for Human Services. Dr. Elliott has been the Director of the research lab since September 2002, and among her many other responsibilities, she has the job or takes it as her charge to ensure that we do accurate and ethical surveys. We greatly appreciate the help of her and her staff in preparing a proper statistically valid survey. We have not done a customer survey in the Water Bureau since at least 2004. And at this particular point in time, we thought it would be useful to do a broad-based customer survey of all of our customers and try out our key service levels, of which we have many. And that was the purpose of this particular survey. We wanted to get a feel for what our customers thought about us generally and specifically about the key service levels that we use. And on that, I'll turn the bulk of the presentation over to Gabe and Jessica. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
My name's Gabe Salmer. I'm the Deputy Director of the Water Bureau. And as Mike was saying, speaking to our customers obviously is a critical part of what we do and in our mission of providing clean, safe, reliable water every day. We communicate with those customers in lots of ways, whether it is our bill inserts, which I hope all of you get and read, whether it's the thousands of calls that come into our customer service every day or our maintenance crews. And I would also echo Commissioner Fish's thanks to our crews. We've had about 75 main breaks and counting over the last 2 weeks, and they have been out there in all kinds of weather. But we talk with our customers on that daily basis. This survey is the scientific component of that conversation so that we can find out what they're thinking and how we can do better. This survey was focused, as Mike said, on gathering customer attitudes towards our key service levels. And the idea is really to connect what people are thinking, what they want, the investments they're looking for, those performance measurements to our strategic planning efforts, and then to our budget. So the rubber really will meet the road. And I will just give you an overview, and in respect to your time, I will try to be brief. You have the report. If you'd like to go into any depth, we can obviously answer any of your questions. But this survey was conducted between May and June of last year. That gives you an idea of what might have been happening and have been top of mind for folks. We were hoping to get just about 400 surveys. We actually did a lot of outreach and got a tremendous response rate in 859 surveys. Those were both paper and online, and I should mention that we devoted about 25% of the project budget to outreach. That was translations, paper surveys, people in apartments, multifamily. We really tried to get as broad a view as we could on the survey. So just some brief highlights. First, I think it's important to mention that there is a tremendous confidence and a pride in our water systems, which I think that you hear as well. 78.5% satisfied or very satisfied with our services. So that's a big percentage of people who think that we're going in the right direction. When we look at customer service, which we also called out specifically, we saw slightly lower numbers of the people who had had interactions with our customer service and called Portland Water Bureau in the last year. That's very consistent with the auditor's annual community survey result for the Bureau at 69%. And I think some of the reasons why we see that slightly lower number is the timing. So this survey, you'll remember, came out when we didn't have the use of auto pay. And so that inconvenience was probably on the mind of customers. We're very happy to have that back, new and improved. And I think that future surveys will reflect that. We also asked about communication. I think that was another important piece of the survey. How do people want to be in touch with the Water Bureau? How can we get this information to them and get feedback from our customers? And we saw a very strong preference for our bill newsletter for that insert, and email and text messaging as fairly low on the list. And that baffled us as we were looking at the list. I mean, I have my phone with me at all times. I certainly prefer to be contacted by text or by phone, but when we talked with our customer service folks, they gave us some insight, and they said, you may want to communicate with your friends, with other folks by text, by phone, but you want your government agencies to have just the information they need to contact you, probably no more than that. So we are looking at how do we have that transparency, that convenience, but then also how do we meet people where they are? And I think the answer is really letting people customize and giving the right methods at the right time for the right information. And then I'll just touch on investments. In addition to the key service levels, we asked two big picture questions. So how do our customers feel about investments in our water system? And I should be clear that this is not a true willingness to pay type question where you say, here are all the trade-offs. So we were just looking generally to get information about where we should pursue the conversation further. So first we asked about automated meters, and we asked whether customers would want to see real-time information about the water they use, about leak detection, and have a true monthly bill. And very high results here, 67% said that that was moderately or very important to them. And the other area we wanted to get attitudes about investment was earthquake preparedness. So I've all heard about the big one. We asked customers how important it was to them for the Bureau to invest in water system improvements to prepare for a major earthquake. And we got even stronger results here. 88.5 thought that was moderately or very important. And finally, we asked about values questions, how important quality, safety, affordability, reliability are to customers. So no real surprise here that these are all scored very highly. We had, and at the top of the list, safety, quality, reliability, those were all scored over 4.75 on a 5-point scale. Affordability coming in just under that. And then at the end of our survey, we asked people to provide any other comments that they had. We made it a free-form discussion, and about a third of the people responded, which I think for our PSU partners was a high number, so people were engaged in this survey. And their comments ran mostly to either cost concerns, whether the rates are too high, or what the money is used for. So that tells us that affordability is on people's minds and that transparency, which I think is an area we have been improving in of late, those are still key issues. So in terms of next steps, we have all this data. How do we use it? Well, first we are sharing that with the individual groups within the Water Bureau, making sure customer service representatives have all that data broken down with engineering, with our water quality group, so they can see how customers are viewing their work. And then we've also conducted, and I should say Jessica has conducted, a review of 500 service levels from best practice utilities all over to see how we interface there and our service levels and our performance reporting. So ultimately, this information will be used for our strategic planning process to provide a reality check on costs, on benefits, and then how we continue to deliver the best value to our customers. With that, I'll leave it there for any questions that you might have.
Questions?
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at your survey results here, and they're very interesting. So it says 78% of people never or rarely drink bottled water. But then also on a on a subsequent slide, it says about 50% never or rarely drink filtered tap water. That's us, right?
We're not filtered.
Oh,
so that might mean running it through a Brita filter or one of those filters in your refrigerator. You probably don't change as often as you should.
Okay. Thank you. It's very interesting results. Yeah.
Any further questions from the council? Do we have any public testimony today?
We have 4 signed up. Joe Walsh, Shedrick Wilkins, Charles Johnson. Please come up.
Sirs?
Again, for the record, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. When I read this report, I was curious, and maybe I missed it. Does this include apartment dwellers or just people that use water? Well, I use water, actually. However, I don't pay for the bill because I live in an apartment complex. So the owner of the building pays for the bill. How do you get me involved in the survey? How can you do that? I'm not sure you can, but it's an interesting dilemma because of the percentage of people living in apartments is large. So their interest is kind of important because the owners will jack up the rents if you jack up the rates on the water. And that's happened to us twice. One for 100, another for 80. We can't sustain very much more. So is there a way that in the next survey, I'm not suggesting this one, this was a good survey. I read it and I kind of smiled, and I give a compliment to the Water Bureau under Commissioner Fish. Actually, when you do a good job, you should be recognized. I just get annoyed when you recognize people for doing mediocre stuff. So anyway, that's my big question, and nobody seemed to have an answer that I knew. So I thought maybe somebody here would have an answer to that. And if you're not including the apartment, how do we do that, and when could we do it? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm Shedrick J. Wilkins. I may change my name to Jay because it's more friendly. I had a fear of public speaking, Mayor, and I lost it 6 years ago when I started talking, and I got everything printed out too. So, well, anyway, Jay says, I feel about the water report is the water in Portland is very inexpensive, but not filtered. And
Say that again?
it's, people seem to like cheap water. They want it to be inexpensive. If
That
the
was-
cost goes
that
up,
was
they get angry,
shameless,
right?
Commissioner.
Okay, and it's not filtered. So, one of the things, if there are things in the water that'll make you sick, I wish to compliment the mayor on Sunday. I met him at a forum for healthcare in which I thought there would be 100 people. There was 10,000 people there. Of course, they had 2 senators and 2 congressmen, but it was something. So, but anyway, one thing about lead being in the water, in the last 3 years I've been getting, and I've told city council, stomach flus. I think they come from the liners, they fly around, there's certain months. I am taking, not when I get it, I am taking an immune boosting pill that costs $80, which has got vitamin C, zinc, and a bunch of stuff. It's funny that zinc is actually a metal and so is lead, but there are metals that are good for you, so you have to look at it that way. And I'm going to take it every day, and I take dizzy pills. I'm like a canary in a coal mine. I'm 60. When I get these stomach flus, I get dizzy, I fall down. But recently, they've been going through the dizzy pills. They're basically seasick pills. So what I'm saying about water is quality water depends on what you do with it. If it's cheap, be careful because you may drink it and think that it's not harm you. And water is also a great diffuser of vitamins. If you get vitamins, the powdered, you have to stir it up in water. That's how it gets in your body. Also, viruses, like stomach viruses that make me throw up and get dizzy, go into other people, and 70% of your body is water. So everybody's like cooking these things up, and I'm getting them. And I'll talk to City Hall and see if this immune boosting pill works. Because sometimes I get dizzy going into a movie theater. And later on that night, I'm getting sick. It's that bad.
Charles Bridge Over Troubled Waters Crane Johnson. And while the gentleman's away from his microphone, very inexpensive, unfiltered, delicious, cost-effective water. But the best thing about our water in Portland is it's still under the control of real democracy. A few years ago, voters turned out and made it clear how they want water managed and not poisoned. I think that there's still not unanimity with our water commissioner about how much we really need to use Columbia Wellfield water and mixing. And exactly, thank you, Mr. Smumberg. And I hope that when we look at the situation that people in Cascade Locks are facing with water, I hope that people in Portland will own our government, own our elections, and own our water, so that we get the best, healthy, well-maintained water. People should take a look at what a little teeny part of our water bill bought a nice 33-page report. So if we go to portlandoregon.gov and look at the city agenda, you can see that. I hope that in the future, especially on Commissioner Fish's page, maybe they'll also link to what the auditor's research was, so we can get 2 perspectives of the quality of our water bureau, and people will just become engaged. Unfortunately, there's going to be one thing the water bureau is going to be talking about is a different kind of mess up around Washington Park. Eventually, the real reservoirs will be replaced with scenic caps, and there's a lot of dissent among whether that's a best practice or not. But the way to get best practices is for people to know what's happening with their water and engage and fight for it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there any additional public testimony?
One more, and that's Jesse Spomberg.
Hello.
Hey, let's see you guys again. My name's Jesse Spomberg. It wouldn't be fair for me to bridge crane you guys on your first day. So you guys already said everything I had to say about that otherwise. But coincidentally, we're here talking about the Water Bureau. And we have a new council member and a new mayor. The problem with the Water Bureau is that there's a lot of entrenched corruption in the Water Bureau. And while Commissioner Fish has done a really good job of improving the Water Bureau, the problem is that so many of these positions and these long-term positions go back to the previous commissioner that ran the Water Bureau. So I know a lot of times, by 11:30 or whatever time it is right now, it's easy just for this to turn into blah, blah, blah. I just want to encourage you guys that when you hear these water things, please pay close attention, because a water bill is an equal factor in displacement. It's as hard to come by as rent. And right now, our rates just continue to go up. It seems like every year Commissioner Fish throws another rate increase, but that's apparently the way it works. But then we have these projects like the reservoirs. We don't need that stupid reservoir. And we can argue till we're blue in the face who's to blame for the reservoir. But now we finally made it through Charlie Hales, and we finally made it through Steve Novick, and we finally have people that actually give a crap up here. And the energy up here is just so much more beautiful now. You guys look so handsome today. I never tell a woman she's pretty, but you have nice hair. My point is, please, sunlight is a disinfectant, not just in our reservoirs, but also on our city council. And I just encourage you guys to pay really close attention to when people are up here talking about our water, because pretty soon we're going to be Flint, Michigan. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor, if I could,
Yes, sir.
before we take a vote, thanks, Jesse. There were, I think, 3 questions posed. I'll give succinct answers before the vote. First, Mr. Walsh asked whether we polled renters in addition to homeowners. The answer is yes. The way it was done sampled renters and homeowners. We will get you the split, so you have those numbers. And your admonition that we make sure that we listen carefully to renters, since they're a big piece of our customer base, is well taken. And we will make sure in any future surveys we expand the number of renters we talk to. But we'll get you those numbers. To Mr. Johnson, who raised the question of the auditor's survey and comparing this survey. Yes, we have put that up. We'll make sure that it is easy to find. And to your point, Mr. Johnson, it's interesting that 2 different surveys, 2 different methodologies. The auditor came up with about 80% satisfaction with water quality among the people she surveyed. We had 79%. So it tells us that we're in the right ballpark. And then to the question that Mr. Spomberg just raised about rates and costs, number one, we take very seriously collectively our commitment to try to bring the increases annually closer to the rate of inflation, because obviously people's wages are not going up to meet the cost of basic services. It's hard to do when you're also having to invest in infrastructure and prevent bad things from happening, but we take that point seriously. Number 2, infrastructure, like burying pipes and making sure we serve the west side if there's an earthquake. Number 2, the bill that we send out, Mayor, you know this, but it often gets lost in the discussion. The bill we send to customers, 1/3 of that bill is water, the rest is water, sewer, stormwater. If you live in several suburban communities, you pay more for water. So our water is actually a relative bargain. You pay more here for water, sewer, stormwater, and that's because we've had to self-fund all the federal mandates, and we've had to pay for the big pipe and other things. Let me finish.
We haven't self-funded. We've taken terrible bonds.
Okay, let me just finish.
For those, and that's why our bill is so high.
Jesse, let me finish, please.
Well, keep it real, please.
Okay, let me finish. And as to the question of lowering the burden on vulnerable renters and homeowners, I appreciate that was salted throughout a number of comments. We are working currently with the Pub and the Cub, our 2 oversight bodies, to figure out, Mayor, how to get more discounts, particularly to older adults that are renting or owning their homes, where we want to keep them in their homes. We don't want them to be displaced because they can't afford utilities. And we have programs, but we're going to find better ways of making sure people know how to access them. and we're figuring out better ways to streamline accessing them so that the bureaucracy does not create an obstacle. So I appreciate all those comments.
Very good. And do you have a motion, Commissioner Fish?
A motion to approve the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Sue, if you could read the roll.
Fritz.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Fish and Mike Sturr and the entire team. This is good work. Keep going. Aye.
Thank you, Director Storr, Deputy Director Solmer, Ms. Letney, Professor Elliott, and the whole team that's worked on this. And I do a shout out to Kathy Cook, who runs our customer service. Mayor, I appreciate that you have assigned me the Water Bureau, which was an assignment I had under your predecessor, an assignment that I asked for under your administration, an assignment that I'm very proud to continue to play a leadership role in. And I just want to provide context for this report. In the last 4 years, the Water Bureau has dealt with a lot of controversy. And I don't have to, it's obvious, I don't have to belabor it, but whether it was the Water District fight, an effort to seize control of the utilities away from the city and create an independent entity, whether it was the Anderson lawsuit and the long-standing fight about who should pay for what, whether it was the fallout from what we learned in Flint, Michigan, in a place where they weren't doing the kinds of things we've done for a generation in removing lead from source water and lead from the distribution system, with rising rates and then last year with inconvenience to our customers, where in order to safeguard confidential information, we had to discontinue auto pay for a period of time, and that inconvenienced 30,000 people. 30,000 people who had set up auto pay and expected it to work and were inconvenienced, and we deeply regret that. But here's the good news. We have come out from this 4-year period of controversy, a stronger organization with better public approval ratings and with a culture of commitment to doing better in all that we do. And this survey was designed to ask some very specific questions about how we can serve our customers better and how we communicate better, and we will take this data and we will do what we always do, which is we will improve. The road ahead is going to be challenging. This mayor has said that resilience is something that he's going to use to look at all the budget requests. We do the mother of all resilience investments, and currently it's Washington Park and the Willamette River Crossing, 2 projects which will cost money, but will ensure that we have safe and reliable water in the event of the big one. But we're also making other changes to adapt to our customers. And the one plug I want to put in before I close is that over 20,000 people have now chosen the convenience of getting e-bills. And we love e-bills. One, it saves paper. 2 is it allows us to send you the bill directly to whatever platform you want. And here's the third advantage to e-bills. Under the new suite of tools that we're unfolding, you will be able to designate a third party to also get the bill. Now, each of us knows someone who is an older adult that needs to have someone keep an eye on what they're doing, just because sometimes older adults are forgetful. And under this new system, you will be able to sign up to get the bill of a family member or loved one so that you can make sure that bill is being paid and monitor and help that older adult. That's one of the systems improvements we've done in response to feedback, and we'll continue to do more. The last 4 years have been challenging, not because the Bureau ever did anything wrong, but because this council made decisions which made their job harder. And today I just want to thank Mike and his team for their superb service, and I'm proud to be your commissioner in charge. Aye.
Saltzman.
Very informative survey. Thank you very much. Aye.
Udaley.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish. I would like to add that as a formerly cost burden renter, I would certainly support any efforts your Bureau is interested in making and providing discounts for low-income residents. And I would also like to mention that in the years that I've had to juggle my rent and my utilities, that the Water Bureau has in fact been the nicest utility to deal with. So thank you to the Water Bureau as well. Aye.
Wheeler.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish, and I appreciated the testimony and the questions were raised, and Commissioner, I appreciated your quick response to those questions. That was illustrative for me as well. I want to thank you, Commissioner and the Bureau for their hard work on this. I thought it was a great survey, and the information that was gleaned from it was informative. The report is accepted. Sue, we're now at the regular agenda. If you could read the next item, please.
Item 56, extend term of a franchise granted to Olympic Pipeline Company to transport petroleum products by pipeline.
So this is a legacy ordinance. It's an existing pipeline in the city. This ordinance and extension complies with the city's new fossil fuels policy. This is not a pipeline expansion. The reason the Office of Community Technology wants this extension is to negotiate some basic safety measures into the franchise agreement, which are similar to what exists in other existing pipeline franchises. Once the franchise agreement is renegotiated, this is going to come back to the City Council for a vote on the new franchise agreement. I've asked Jennifer Lee from the Office of Community Technology and Ben Walters from the City Attorney's Office to come and give us a quick briefing on this. Thank you both for being here.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Jennifer Lee from the Office for Community Technology, Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services. You've already covered a lot of what I was going to say, so just briefly, our office has the responsibility for negotiating and managing franchise agreements on the behalf of the city. This agenda item would extend the term for the current franchise agreement for Olympic Pipeline. City Council granted the original franchise to Olympic Pipeline in 1989 to use the streets. The current franchise is set to expire this month. City staff have been in discussions with the company for a new renewal franchise agreement. However, we need additional time to negotiate a modern franchise, as you put it, to replace the franchise from 1989. The extension would give us what I hope to be ample time to not only negotiate a new agreement, but also to complete the formal franchising process required by the city charter. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
And I'm Ben Walters with the City Attorney's Office. I'm just here in case there's any questions. You had a busy agenda this morning and you still have a lot of work left to do. So in case there aren't any questions, I'll just wait to.
Colleagues, any questions? That was easy. Is there any public testimony on this item?
Not have a sheet for this.
Is there anybody here who would like to testify on this item? Come on up, please. And the usual, if you could introduce yourself, 3 minutes, please.
Yeah, I'm Jay Wilkins, and I'm going to get boos and hisses again when I talk about this. I have problems with people that protest pipelines, whether they be oil, gas, whatever. If they use the gas or cars or whatever, I'm just saying is that anybody who really protests pipelines, they should be safe, or is basically making an anarchistic statement like this is causing global warming, yet they use these things. And I wish the City Council would just ignore those as anarchistic ideas. Maybe 100 years from now, we'll look back and say we shouldn't have had natural gas, we also had solar panels on our house, or whatever, and electric blankets, but right now, that's not the way people do, and I find it kind of hypocritical. That's the way I look at it. Just, this is a present day. People drive around in cars, and they shouldn't complain that some oil pipeline is on somebody's land, as long as it's safe.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Charles Bridge Crane Johnson, and hooray for the Office of Community Technology. But one thing, first of all, I'm a big fan of unity. Hopefully we'll see a lot of united people on Saturday in response to the Trump inauguration the day after. But in other places we have unified city-county government, and not only do we not have that here, we don't have a unified Department of Public Safety. So the Fire Bureau and the Police Bureau have their individual heads. And I think that this opportunity for a pipeline franchise poses some public safety risks that are a little bit different than when you deal with a cable franchise or a telephone franchise. And I hope that Olympic, as they pursue this franchise, will find the maximum amount of free time and employee resources of their employees so that the director of the Fire Bureau and Chief Marshman's designee can have a robust discussion about safety and pipelines. We should get our money's worth. This is an existing infrastructure pipeline, so I'm not, going to freak out Shedrick with any worries about shutting it down. But we just mentioned that the Water Bureau wants to be resilient for the big one. And when Olympic comes and says they want to continue to do business in the city of Portland, within their budget and resources, I think they can have time to have specialists of theirs talk to the people at the Fire Bureau and the Police Bureau about other bad pipeline experiences, things where there have been mistakes, and how Portland can be on the cutting edge so that Olympic can continue to operate safely in Portland. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Newell. I've lived in Portland probably 24 years now. And I have had the experience of defending our water in many situations, our drinking water. And today is a very critical day because this is a corporation that on the surface, you're talking about a mechanical contract. You're talking about a lot more than that. This is the beginning of the West Coast Infrastructure Exchange, which you as treasurer promoted and have made our water privatized because the banks own the debt on the water because of your program.
It's not true.
Well, the Winona Howder Food and Water Watch has started 60 cases across the United States because in the year 2000, a friend of mine was water commissioner in Tualatin, and she attended all the corporations that were lining up to privatize water across the U.S., and that has happened. So they have at least 60 cases throughout the United States already to try to prevent this. And I've warned people on Enron. I've warned people, and I've had effect on Enron, and I've had effect in other ways. But this is very troubling because this is the commons. And not only that, it's the essence of life. And when people pay prices on it, they don't just pay at their home. They pay at everything that they purchase that relates to water. So you're talking about expenses that will accelerate for the individuals in this city and will be deprived of water. When you are deprived of water, there are major health issues involved, so then government has to make more money in order to cover those costs. And some of those are long-term illnesses with mental illness. And if you don't look at the qualities and the value of water, you've really missed the point. And you're looking at it with a corporation that is a known control corporation. We won't even know what's in our water because they've already started doing that across the United States. I don't think this decision is valid, number one. It can be challenged in court, number two. It will be challenged. And I think it wastes a lot of your time and money to promote this and especially to work with this corporation. So I hope today that you will listen to reasoning, give more time for the public to give consideration because I didn't even hear the water issues brought up in the campaign, the mayoral campaign, and that is really a community tragedy. And I was also not treated properly, as your wife indicated, when I brought up the issue to you at a coffee shop. So I think it's time to pause and really seriously consider what this means. It's not just about structure or mechanical. It's about our water and life access to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public testimony on this matter?
Mayor, if I might make a comment before we pass it to second reading.
Sure.
I just wanted to thank Jennifer Lee and the Office for Community Technology of all of the hirings that I've been involved in over my 8 years. Yours is one of the most satisfying. Thank you very much for all your good work.
Very good. Anything else before we pass this along? So this is non-emergency. It moves to a second reading. Sue, you can call the next item.
Item 57, authorize contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of Mount Scott Arletta Sewer Rehabilitation Project for $1,910,000.
Commissioner Fish?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to welcome Scott Gibson and Margaret Russell, who are with us to walk us through a contract. This matter would authorize a contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Mount Scott Arletta Sewer Rehabilitation Project. Now, as my colleagues know, the average age of the pipes in this area is about 90 years old. This ordinance would authorize repair and rehabilitation of 5,500 lineal feet of the public sewer pipe. Construction would begin in April and last about 1 year, and Scott's here to fill us in on the details. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor
Good morning.
and Commissioners. My name is Scott Gibson. I'm a Principal Engineer at the Bureau of Environmental Services. My team at the Bureau provides project management, engineering, and design services in support of the Bureau's construction projects. With me here today is Margaret Russell. She's an engineering associate, senior engineering associate with the Bureau, and she's also our project manager for this effort. As Commissioner Fish mentioned, we are here today asking to approve an ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract for construction of the Mount Scott Arleta Sewer Rehabilitation Project. The current estimate for this contract is $1.9 million. If the ordinance is approved, the Chief Procurement Officer will return to Council with her report on the procurement results. This project is a part of BS's large-scale sewer rehabilitation program. Specifically, Mount Scott Arleta is the 28th project of a Plan 39. To date, we've rehabilitated 41 miles of failing or failed sewers over 3 phases. Margaret has a very short presentation for you which describes the specifics of this project. Margaret.
Hello. As mentioned, Mount Scott Arleta is part of the large-scale sewer rehabilitation program. The slide you see shows other large-scale projects in yellow, but the Mount Scott Arleta project is in green. It is bound on Southeast 46th and Southeast 82nd. Its northern boundary is Holgate, and its southern boundary is Duke. This slide shows some of the typical defects that you would see on mainline pipe. At the top are cracks and some deteriorated pipe. The lower 2 slides show lateral connections to the mainline pipe. The one is a dropped connection and the other is a hole at the mainline. This project will rehabilitate mains, sewer service laterals, and manholes, and it will protect public health, property, and the environment, increase sewer system capacity and reliability, and reduce the risk of sewer releases to home, businesses, and streets. It will be rehabilitating 22 segments of pipe, approximately 1 mile. The diameter of pipe are 8 inches to 30 inches. The average age of the pipe is 90 years old. 92% of the construction is going to be on residential streets and 8% on major streets. The construction methods will be about 50% open cut trench construction. The other half will be CIPP, cure in place lining, which is a trenchless lining of pipe. BES Public Involvement has done extensive outreach. This is a picture of a map that was sent out to the community members. We have contacted residents, neighborhood and business associations, schools, TriMet and ODOT, as well as the Apostolic Faith Church. There will be work near 2 schools, Arleta and Woodstock Elementary. Also, there will be construction in a small section of the Apostolic Faith Church parking lot. We have limited construction in these areas as to not impact the schools and the church. Also, concerning night work and a noise variance, there are 2 locations. At Southeast 50th, we are lining a 30-inch diameter pipe that will take 12 hours to cure, so we need a night work. And there will be night work at Southeast 82nd, which is a major highway where we will do open cut construction at night. As mentioned, the engineer's estimate is $1.9 million. We have a high level of confidence in this project. We have done similar projects and feel we've taken care of and are knowledgeable about any possible issues. As mentioned, we hope to start advertising in late January, start construction in April, and it will be a 1-year construction contract. That's all. Do you have any questions?
Questions? Is there any public testimony on this item?
I did not have a sheet out.
Is there anybody who'd like to testify on this item? Come on up.
On the issue of sewers, I'm Jay Wilkins. On the issues of sewers, 20 years ago, we started a sewer project, sewer and water project. I think as energy costs go up in the future.
Hold 1 sec. Can we ask the council, can we bring back the screen? Thank you very much.
2005, the price of oil went up. It'll probably continue to grow in the future. It's important to do these things now. Building a house doesn't really, there's a lot of concrete involved with pipes. Energy's cheap, do it now. And Portland was very wise, like say these pipes are 90 years old, or do these things now. because you wait later on, it'll cost more money. And really making a house, it's hard to say what a house is, but houses are made out of wood, and generally that's lighter and it'll truck. So do these things now, and in a post-Cold War situation, Portland was very wise to do the $1 billion sewer plan. I'm not remember in taking people off septic tanks. In the future, you just simply, it'll cost too much to do these things, and housing is kind of weird. It's mostly made out of all this nice wood we have in Oregon.
Thank you. This moves on to a second reading, and I'd ask the clerk to read the next item, please.
58, authorize price agreements with 3 firms for on-call civil engineering services not to exceed $500,000 for each price agreement.
Commissioner Fish?
Thank you, Mayor. We're joined today by Dave Peters, Principal Engineer. This item would authorize price agreements with 3 firms for on-call civil engineering services for 3 years. Take it away, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about these price agreements. The Water Bureau, I'm David Peters with the Water Bureau, Principal Engineer over the engineering planning. The Water Bureau often needs specialty and support engineering services to aid in the delivery of their planning, their design, and the construction of their capital improvement program. These contracts help us by providing technical support for expertise we may not have internally. Some examples would be electrical engineers or structural engineers. These contracts also help us level out the service that we provide. We schedule our workload based on the number of people that we have, and as we have projects that come in throughout the year that may need to get addressed quickly, this allows us an outlet to complete those projects. This legislation will authorize 3 on-call professional, technical, and expert service contracts with 3 different civil engineering firms. And again, they'll support us in the development of our capital plan. Each contract will be $500,000 with a maximum term of 3 years on those contracts. The combined total of all 3 of those contracts, therefore, will not exceed $1.5 million. To utilize these services, we'll have an effort called a task order, where we negotiate the services needed and provide the consultant a request under a task order. Those task orders cannot exceed $250,000 as in the individual task order, and typically are much smaller. And we rotate through each of the 3 firms. So one firm isn't used all the time. We rotate through with each task order that comes up. We went through a standard RFP proposal process. There were 10 firms that proposed on this work, and we selected 3 of them for these contracts, and they were deemed as the 3 that best met the requirements of this proposal. All 3 firms had really good response to the disadvantaged minority, women, emerging small business criteria. The average of the 3 firms is about 36%. We had a low of 30% and a high of 45% with these 3 firms. The budget, the $1.5 million is about 10% of our professional technical and expert services over the next 3 years.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying earlier. Percentage of what?
The percentage of our professional, technical, and expert services budget.
Okay, thank you.
So it's 10% of that budget. About $5 million a year is spent for professional services. So 90% of the work that we do for professional services is handled with an RFP on a project-specific basis.
Okay, and then with regard to women and minority participation, those statistics are percentage of budget?
In this particular case, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Good presentation. Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Is there any questions on the part of the council? Thank you, sir. Is there any public testimony on this item?
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you're free to go. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Alrighty. Good afternoon. For the record, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. And I just wanted to thank the mayor for going over both those percentage issues. It doesn't need to be explicitly in here, but one thing that would have made this proposal even better if there was a little clause talking about STEAM, science, technology, arts, and math, as it relates to, like, it's a little tacky that to get workplace diversity, we actually have to mandate bring your daughter to work day type stuff. But, and these are quality professional engineering firms, so that type of thing is already happening. But when we talk about the social costs of doing business in Portland, that's what we mean, is we want not only these firms to do excellent professional work, but to have an awareness that they're getting public dollars so that, for example, when we do the Mount Scott Arletta neighborhood thing, that girls especially who are sometimes face particular challenges getting into certain professional careers have an opportunity to interact with women who are working in those professions, hopefully in a situation where women can be extremely candid about their experiences in those professions. But so when we rotate this $500,000 through 3 professional engineering firms, the types of question you asked, Mr. Mayor, and lead me to believe that everybody on this council will work with where we see an increased situation where everybody in Portland knows that every type of work is open to them, regardless of their background. And so that, you know, somebody's daughter won't just see a bunch of dudes working on a sewer project. She'll see a diverse workforce, and the engineering firms doing that type of work will invite students to visit their offices. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further council discussion? This moves to second reading. Clerk, if you could call the next item.
59, authorize a contract with Pure Technologies U.S., Inc., not to exceed $3,610,710 for the Bull Run Supply conduits.
Commissioner Fish.
Welcome back our friend Dave Peters, Principal Engineer for the Water Bureau, who just happened to be here for this presentation. Colleagues, there are 3 large conduits that transport our pristine Bull Run water to Portland. Installed in 1911 and 1925, conduits 2 and 3 are reaching the end of their useful service lives. To better understand the kind of rehabilitation and replacement options that will be before us, the Bureau is seeking your permission and approval to contract with Pure Technologies. This work is highly technical with little or no possibility of subcontracting. The contract term is approximately 4 years, and our confidence level in the overall cost is medium. And with that, I'll ask Dave if I missed anything.
Well, that covered a majority of it, but I can run through and give you a little more of an overview.
Okay.
Again, my name is David Peters, Principal Engineer with the Water Bureau. And this procurement action will authorize professional technical expert services contract with Pure Technologies to evaluate the existing conditions of the Portland Water Bureau's 3 large diameter steel water mains. And these mains transport water the 25 miles from the Bull Run watershed into the city of Portland and our large in-town reservoirs. Pure provides non-destructive examination technologies which will inspect and assess the conditions of our conduits, and then they'll be able to take that information, provide estimates of the remaining useful life, and also provide options on corrective actions we can take to extend the life of those conduits. The final negotiated amount for this PTE contract is just over $3.6 million. It's been over 25 years since we've been inside the pipes to assess the conditions, and at that time it was just assessing them visually. And we have not done a comprehensive evaluation in the way that we're proposing to do with this contract. As Commissioner Fish pointed out, conduits 2 and 3 are fairly old, 1911, 1925, and are nearing the end of their useful life. So in anticipation of this, we require this assessment. This assessment came about in 2015 as we did a conduit rehabilitation plan that outlined a series of steps that we'll take to ensure the viability of these conduits into the future. And this is the first step in evaluating the conduits so that we can begin to put together the strategies for next steps to ensure their continued use. The work performed by Pure Technologies will involve a series of condition surveys on approximately 6 miles of each conduit. And then that will be followed by the data analysis and reporting of the findings. And they'll be using some high-tech tools that they'll be pulling through the pipe or floating through the pipe, depending on the individual sections, that will tell us a lot about the pipe, more than we can see than just by going in and visualizing it with the naked eye. They do this without damaging the lining of the pipe, and we also don't have to dig up major portions of the pipe to get this type of information. We've used these tools on smaller pipes throughout our system, so we have some experience with the information that we'll get and how we can use this to make decisions about improving our pipes. As mentioned already, a majority of that work will be self-performed by Pure Technologies and their subcontractors. The subcontracted element on this project is 11% of the total available to be subcontracted. There are nine firms that are subcontractors on this. 5 of them are certified as MWSB. So at that point, I'll ask if there are any questions.
Colleagues, any questions? Is there any public testimony on this matter?
I did not have a sign-up sheet.
Okay, looks like there's 2 people who'd like to come on up. Thank you.
My name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. One of the advantages of sitting here in person, and we've argued this, is that something comes up that stimulates a question. You can't do that from home. You can't do that from someplace else. It's very difficult to do that. So if you're sitting here in person and someone comes up with something that bothers you, you can come up and ask the question, and sometimes you get an answer. If you're going to spend millions of dollars on the evaluation of the pipe, was there any study done just to redo it? Take it out, fix it. How much would that cost? Would it cost $10 million? Wouldn't make sense. Study it first. If it costs $2 million, why don't you just take it out and fix it? If you have a date on it, and I heard a date of about 100 years, why don't we just replace it then? I mean, 100 years is a long time. 74 is a long time, but 100 years is a lot longer. That's my question. Was anybody considering fixing it, replacing it? You're going to do a multi-million-dollar study to find out what the damages are, the wear and tear on it, where we're going on this. And it's what, 6 miles, I think I heard. Why not just take it out and redo it? You have a brand new section of pipe at least. And it may be cheaper in the long run. I don't know. Don't seem to be anybody studying that part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name's Nancy Newell, and I've recorded that already, and I just made a little bit of a mistake in coming in on the wrong number of contract. But even so, it relates. And to answer Joe's question, what's the purpose of the new pipe? Or what's the purpose of finding things wrong with this pipe? And is there different standards for the conduit so they're seeing whether or not the volume of water coming through it that may end up in Mexico doesn't satisfy the West Coast Infrastructure Exchange, which is a reality. And for Mr. Wheeler to say that what I said in my earlier testimony is not true, I would love to have a public debate, because there's never really been anybody from the Food and Water Watch that we can invite in to debate the issue, because the debate was not allowed during the campaign. So people are not aware of this. They're not aware of the ramifications of this. I think it's only fair to the public, because it's the essence of life once again. And I don't like when officials shut out the public. And you shut me out at the state treasurer's office when I started raising questions. You shut me out at a cafe that was part of your campaign. And I'm not sure that that accomplishes public trust in what you're deciding here. And I think you really should reinforce it, because we've had enough of the Warren Buffetts and the Enrons and running through this city and running rampant. And you know this. And I don't know how you're encouraging a pipeline company like this. I don't know that if you've studied closely enough their ethics, their true operations, how good they are. Do you listen to Food and Water Watch? Do you watch the safeguard of the people that have succeeded in their cases throughout the United States? I don't hear that in this council. I didn't hear it about Enron through the whole state. I was the only one that brought it to the Public Utility Commission, and exactly what I said happened. They overtook the electric grid and shut it down in California when they wanted to raise their prices. Water. Why are you playing with something that is so essential to people, that water is being shut off right now, and all you're doing is trickling it in, and when it freezes, they don't get any water, and that's a violation of UN human rights. And I could call soldiers in here and say this city is violating human rights internationally. So I am making these points that are completely valid, realistic. I don't play games. I don't want to waste your time. I want results. I want some discussion. I want some time. This is something very big to be considered, and I think this is a ruse to get information for expansion. And I truly believe that. So let's be real here and get something done and represent the public. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Water is important, and the Bull Run Reservoir, to me, gives the image that the city of Portland itself is powered pretty much by Mount Hood. I worship Mount Hood. There's a Mount Hood Community College because the water is elevated. That way it doesn't have to be pumped with electricity. To force it under pressure, it goes like this. Water runs downhill, it goes uphill, right? As long as it's lower than the other point. People don't know this about Mount Hood. There's 6 small-scale hydroelectric dams that make as much electricity as the Bonneville Dam that crosses the Columbia. So to me, when people talk about tapping into Columbia water or radon or electricity, the real truth is Mount Hood is awesome. It's a beautiful mountain. It's where you get your electricity from, or at least a base part of electricity. It's also where you get this water from the rain. It rains a lot here. It rains a lot in Seattle. And go through New Mexico somewhere where they have these big giant water tanks like at St. John's. They pump the groundwater right out of the ground and you drink it.
Thank you. Is there, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
It's okay. Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. And we're talking about the conduits that bring, as Commissioner Fish, I can't quite exactly quote him, but the great Bull Run water, these 100-year-old conduits that bring the Bull Run water down for its sad, sad fate of mingling with Columbia Wellfield water. That doesn't always have to happen, and it's balanced based on people who have a different idea of what's good than what my idea is. But Ms. Newell has talked to you about regional infrastructure and the fate of water. We know that there's a real polarized issue in a neighboring jurisdiction, Cascade Locks, and Nestle taking water. So I think that our previous mayor used to be really excited about some West Coast mayoral things he did. And I think the way people in Portland have engaged about water, it's an excellent opportunity for the Water Bureau, the mayor, the new faces on the city council to be more engaging and even improve, even though we have the great numbers from the reports earlier. Now that we're talking about these 100-year-old conduits and our reliance on Bull Run water, to have public forums where people are engaged around water. This council, just 3 or 4 months ago, did something that was hopefully not just a symbolic token gesture. The council passed a resolution in solidarity with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, who are battling under the slogan in their language, Miniwakoni, that water is life. And that's one of the reasons this area is economically vibrant and flourishing, is the resiliency of the water system here that we're not going to let get privatized. So when people come up here and say hard, challenging things about the economic pressures to do this or that with the water, it's an excellent opportunity for all you city councilors, not just the one who's assigned the Water Bureau, to engage. And it's not always beautiful. Some people think that there needs to be a very strong headbutting and assertion against Governor Brown's failure to be more supportive of the people of Cascade Locks and their desire not to have their water done in a deal with Nestle. And unfortunately, you're not state treasurer anymore, so you can't get creative about ways that we can stimulate the economy in Cascade Locks and have people living near clean public water and still have good paying jobs. But that's one of the things that Portland constituents look for, is for public leaders to engage around the most important issues, and water is right up there with keeping our homeless people from dying when they can't get the mental health services they need or the basic shelter they need. Thank you.
Mayor, I know it's late, but if you could indulge me, I'm going to have Dave Peters come back for a second and just have him answer 3 questions. Dave, welcome. The first question is, we had some testimony about why not just replace the 12 miles of conduits. Why go through this exercise of assessing the condition? What's your answer?
Well, what we believe is that the conduits are really major portions of the conduit are in good shape. There are 75 miles of conduit. We're only reviewing 18 miles, 6 miles on each of the 3 pipes. It's about $1 million a mile to go in and just install new pipes. So each conduit individually would be a very big effort to replace. So what we know is that there will be sections that will be in really good shape. We're just trying to find the sections that need either to be replaced or repaired. We're looking for more cost-effective ways to improve the condition of our conduits.
Actually, that answers all 3 of my questions. And the comment, Mayor, I would just also make is that to those who are concerned in the community about privatization of our water supply, let me just reassure them, this council fought a water district proposal, which many of us viewed as a Trojan horse for an eventual takeover of our supply by private forces. We have no intention of privatizing our water supply. And to those who are also concerned about expansion, let me be very, very direct. I wish we could sell more water. We are losing suburban customers. And by losing suburban customers, we have to share the costs of maintaining the system on a smaller customer base. So if I could be king for a day, we would not be having suburban customers opt out. We would have as many customers in the region as possible, because that way we could share the costs. But there are no plans to privatize our system, and that would be fought tooth and nail by this council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further council comments or questions?
No, that's
This moves to second reading. Sue, could you read the next item?
Item 60, create a local improvement district to construct street, sidewalk, and stormwater improvements north of Southwest Lorrahdale Street in the Southwest 47th Avenue Phase 1 Local Improvement District.
Commissioner Saltzman?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll turn it over to Andrew Abbey, our Local Improvement District Administrator.
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. It's a pleasure to be here today. So all of our local improvement districts that come to council for formation come to council twice, once at the resolution phase and then again at the ordinance phase. So the previous council approved a resolution to initiate LID formation proceedings on November 30th, and now the new council will consider actual formation of the LID. And I especially want to extend a warm welcome to Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Udaley. It's a privilege to have you consider this item. This presentation will look familiar to the previous council, but I just simply wanted to walk through it for the new council. And before I start, I might just say that we did not receive any objections to any remonstrances against LID formation from any of the property owners whose properties are proposed for inclusion in the LID. So the slide that you're looking at here is a map of the project, Southwest 47th Avenue. It was a short unpaved street in West Portland Park, north of Southwest Lorrahdale Street, south of Southwest Barbara Boulevard. When the previous council approved the resolution of intent on November 30th, we had 99.4% petition support for the LID, which is one of our stronger levels of support. We've had a few 100% support LIDs over the years. This didn't quite get there, but was very close. This next slide is a picture of the north end of the street. You can see that this is a dead-end street. There are multifamily apartment complexes on each side of the street. It's a little bit unusual to have unpaved streets next to multifamily apartments. This is another view of the north end of the street. You can see this is where the eventual street improvements will terminate. This is the north portion of the right-of-way looking down at Southwest Barbara Boulevard. For obvious reasons, we're not planning to connect the street to Southwest Barbara Boulevard. This steep drop-off is why we're proposing a dead-end street. And then just to wrap up this presentation, as I showed the previous council, West Portland Park and Southwest neighborhoods have a disproportionately higher proportion of unpaved streets than the city as a whole. You can see from this slide that about 2.8% of the streets in the city of Portland are unpaved citywide, as opposed to 10.4% in West Portland Park. So block by block, we try to make incremental progress in reducing our backlog of unpaved streets. And I might also add that we only have 61% sidewalk coverage citywide, and we will be building sidewalks as part of this LID. So another objective of the LID program is to increase our sidewalk coverage citywide. This project is very close to Barbara Boulevard with future high-capacity transit going to Tigard, so we're pleased to be able to build the infrastructure in advance of, the street infrastructure in advance of the light rail line. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Good presentation. Any public testimony on this item?
Charles Johnson signed up.
Good afternoon, Charles Johnson. I frequently talked about LIDs, and I used to say wonderful things about LIDs, but no more. We need to stop with the LIDs and call them micro-socialisms. As the new regime takes force in Washington, D.C., we're already getting some communism scare tactics, and in part of fighting fear, the real reason for government is just democratic socialism. It's people in neighborhoods banding together what needs done. Bravo to this neighborhood for their over 90% participation, but we need to fix the city code so we don't call them local improvement districts anymore. We call them micro-socialisms. It'll be great for Portland's reputation on the left, too. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a non-emergency item. It moves to second reading. Sue, if you could call what I believe is the last item.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Item 61, authorize a contract with Legacy Good Samaritan Medical Center for a mobile healthcare services pilot program for post-hospital care services for at-risk patients.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. This is really an exciting pilot agreement. I'm sorry it had to be the last item and the Chief Burns had to patiently wait. But this is very exciting because it is a collaboration between Legacy Good Samaritan Hospital and Portland Fire and Rescue to reduce readmissions to the hospital system. And it will provide and involve our people, firefighters, providing evaluation and for people once they've been discharged from the hospital. And the goal is to avoid readmissions to the hospital, which all of us don't want to see, the individuals don't want to see, and it's a cost to all of us. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chief Ken Burns, who's worked hard on this agreement to maybe provide a little more detail.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mayor, and other commissioners. Thank you for your time today. I'll try to be brief. We, Portland Fire and Rescue, is working on being important in all aspects, not just responding to 911. We feel we have a critical role in low acuity, alternative destinations, really working on the total health of our community. So the pilot program that we're asking you to consider and adopt today is a pilot program with Legacy Sam Good Health. The hospital plan is a partnership with us that will have a single person coming out of our EMS office go to pre-designated patients' homes and with the attempt to make sure that they're okay once they're discharged from the hospital. We're going to be focusing on diabetes, congestive heart failure, and COPD, obstructed pulmonary disease. So it'll be a single focus, a person from our office. It's a 6-month trial. There is a revenue reimbursement that could be up to $50,000 over that 6-month period. Of course, those are based on home visits. Home visits are targeted to be 4 home visits per patient. We're really...
I'm sorry, is that a cap? Is that why it's up to $50,000? Is that the maximum that we could be reimbursed?
Yeah, what it is, there's a fee per visit, and the idea is we're really filling the gap. There is some home health care, nurses, there's other avenues for these individuals, 2 to 3 weeks, a month out after they're discharged. We are going to be the immediate gap. We're going to get to their homes within, 24 to 48 hours of being discharged. We're going to meet with the patient before they're discharged with the discharge nurse and make sure everybody understands what the plan is. So we have potential increased revenue. It will depend on the capacity of that person that's assigned to this position. And again, we have great potential to even reach out to other hospitals to gather more partnerships.
Chief, I have a question, and the goal seems to be to go upstream and get into prevention. So I think I think people would be interested in knowing of the folks that you're going to target for these follow-up visits. What's the likelihood in the first couple of weeks of their discharge that they'd be calling 911 and then get a visit by a firefighter and an ambulance service, so that we can kind of compare what we may be preventing by doing some upstream work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of these set of diseases, depending on the hospital, anywhere from 10 to 15% of those discharged are going back into the hospital. So us going to their homes will definitely have a reduction of 911 calls. The same individual who's going to be readmitted could be calling 911 at 2 a.m. And we can head that off at 2 p.m. in the afternoon with the scheduled visit.
And let's be clear, because you use some highfalutin language around low acuity and alternative destinations, and I'm still not sure what you meant, but to bring it to the human scale, because once upon a time, I had the honor for 6 months of being in Dan's shoes. On some of those visits, what firefighters are learning is that people don't have their meds, or haven't taken their meds, or have some other barrier which a firefighter and a team can help address. Could you give us the sort of human scale on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you picture going into someone's home, I've already met the person at the hospital, so I understand what the plan is, but when someone's discharged, it can be confusing. So when our member gets to their home, they're going to check for their meds, but they're also going to do a home fire safety inspection. Do they have a smoke detector? What's their living conditions look like? Do they have food? Do they need other services that maybe haven't yet been brought into the system? So it really is a global approach, not only for getting the person the right care at the right time, but making sure that other partnerships are brought into the situation.
So I have several questions. You just said 50,000, but Exhibit B says 24,000. So I was just wondering if that was a typo.
Well, so this has been about a 2-year project, and we started out with a 3-month pilot. And that's been the conversation. What we're hoping to do now is make it a 6-month pilot. So in essence, it's $24,000 over a 3-month period. In order to get all of the contracts and your approval and get everybody on to actually start the pilot itself would be 6 months, and we're hoping to get about 5 months worth of activity, just lining up all the other contracts and all the players. So essentially, 2 years ago, it was $24,000 for 3 months worth of work. And then we've decided, quite frankly, that 3 months in this type of a pilot may not be enough to really gather the data that you all would be looking for.
So do we need to amend Exhibit B then?
Yeah, I mean, if you feel that you need to, I want to get this pilot going. So I can go back to Good Sam and say, hey, let's go ahead and go with our original 3 months. But in my recommendation, it's a 6-month pilot.
Well, it's pretty easy to just amend it for 6 months and change the number to 50. So with your permission, Commissioner Saltzman, should we do that?
Sure.
I move that amendment.
For a second.
Second.
The amendment is to change the number in Exhibit B to
Does this
50,000.
jeopardize the emergency basis for this?
But we can still do it with we are all unanimous on all the votes.
So we have a motion, we have.
The way to do it would be you could just come back in 3 months and put something on consent to have it keep going, because I certainly agree that 3 months is probably not enough.
Yeah, we want to get this program up and running, hopefully today with a vote, so.
Okay, so I'll just withdraw my motion and come back in 3 months, because I do agree.
And that's fine.
Motion's withdrawn.
It says that, you just said that there's one provider within Portland Fire and Rescue. So why does it refer to paramedics and nurses, both in the plural?
Because the individual that are some of our neighboring agencies have paramedics doing some of the home visits, while others have a nurse doing home visits. So in the contract, we left it open so that we can find the right person. It could be a paramedic or a nurse that's assigned to this partnership.
How many nurses do we have in Portland Fire and Rescue?
We currently have 3. Yeah, one of them is in our office right now, where our health and wellness is a nurse, and we have another nurse that's in active status from Washington. So we have 3 right now.
And who's the physician that would oversee this?
Dr. John Jew has already signed a few months ago a letter acknowledging that we would work under his medical support.
And what about the issue of patient privacy and HIPAA? It seems that the contract says the records are going to stay at Portland Fire and Rescue. Do you already have protocols for making sure that medical issues are, for instance, not public record?
We act under HIPAA compliance at this time, and the medical records per se will be responsible for Good Sam, but our interactions would still be confidential also.
And is your expectation that the union will ask for this to be another premium pay assignment, or is it what they're supposed to be doing anyway?
I believe the union's position is they want us to be involved in all aspects of the community health. I think that they will want this to be a represented position, and there's both sides of why it would be good. When I talk about home fire safety and getting acceptance and up and running programs, having a sworn member does have some benefits.
Are the nurses members of the union?
2 of the 3 that we have today are.
So I would ask you to take back to the union that if you're an emergency medical provider and or a nurse, that is your job, and you should not have to have a premium pay for taking on this kind of approach, because I think, Commissioner, it is like the way of the future. So I think we should not be setting the precedent that just because it's a new way of giving service, it's really not a new service. I'd just like you to take that back. Does this duplicate or replace the county health visiting services?
The county has some services that are contracted out to other hospitals, but right now, Legacy Emmanuel has signed a similar contract with Metro West Ambulance to have paramedics come in, and Tualatin Valley has a contract with Providence St. V. So the hospitals are actually looking for more nimble responses. So the county would come in later, but not in this first 2-week period that we're talking about. We can go in at 8 o'clock at night. We can go in on Sunday. We can go in on these types of conditions.
And is there any issue with that with the county represented employees that we might be poaching some of their work?
No, these similar programs with similar agencies and hospitals have already had conversations with the Nursing Association and realize in certain cases we will actually be referring some of our patients to more of a long-term nurse home follow-up. So we're really filling the gap, not taking their roles.
Thank you. And my final question is, supposing one of the patients in this program does get into an emergency situation, calls 911, or feels that they need a 911, whether they are or not, is there going to be a mechanism to make sure that the nurse or EMS person who's been providing the care is looped in on that visit?
Yeah, if there's, if they somehow get readmitted in between those visits, they will be part of that follow-up. But if you're asking if during the home visit there's a critical need, calling 911 and getting them transported will be critical. So we won't, we will provide life-saving measures during the home visit, but the intent is to recognize declining health of someone who's going to relapse.
Right. I would like to work with you and the 911 center, because I think the person may feel like they have an emergency, or maybe it is one, but it would be helpful to then loop in the provider who's been checking on this person once a week to make sure that the right background information is given back to the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. The protocol, we've already have a protocol written, and it is to contact the primary care physician or the emergency room physician of that hospital to give them a recap of what our individual is going through at this time, and then to take their recommendation. But at the end of the day, the overall condition of do I transport or not, or do I call 911? We will retain that responsibility. Just, we'll take the advice of their doctor, but we will, still take the, won't put the city, we'll make sure they get the right care.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking if the one provider does happen to be on shift at the time that a 911 call comes in, it would be good if we can set up a protocol to make sure that that person who would be a familiar person to the patient would be able to help with that. I'm just struck, this is a fabulous program, I'm glad you're doing it. For $24,000 for 20 patients, that's $4,000. Right now it's $2,000 for 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, for 3 months, that's evidence of how very expensive it is when patients continue to cycle through the emergency room and elsewhere, that the hospital is reaching out to us and wanting to fund at a fairly significant level.
Yeah.
And what will happen to this, the money that's received? Is it going into a particular budget area, or is that part of the Portland Fire's budget proposal?
Well, it will definitely, you will see a budget item for this position to be long-term. Now, and the person who, when we decide who's going to take on this project, they will come out of normal responses, so they'll have to be replaced. So some of this revenue, and especially initially, will offset their cost.
But I hadn't understood that you're not going to do this with current staffing, you're going to hire somebody especially for it.
Well, it would be someone, essentially someone who's riding a fire engine today, and they respond 24/7. Then they would come into our office, and in 40 hours a week, they will be doing this project. Well, that person on the fire engine needs to be replaced by a traveler. So these funds will offset that cost of that traveler replacing the person on the engine.
Well, I am concerned about that. Maybe now's not the time because we're all tired, but as fire calls continue to go down, you and the rest of the council have been exploring how could we use existing personnel to give other services. So I'm a bit concerned to hear that this is not within existing staff, that it would be an extra person.
Yeah, I think there's room for that to grow. I think we're looking to prove the concept that we can have one person connect, build relationships, prove the concept works, and work up a communication protocol to have individuals on fire engines then have to report back to certain physicians. Right now, quite frankly, our communication systems, our data systems, our iPads, being able to link back to patient history and connect with a physician is still yet to be developed. And I love where your thoughts are going, but I think this is the first step to get there.
I have one question, if I could, Chief. So one of the things that I like about this program is you're getting a firefighter who's a trusted person in uniform into someone's home. And we've, for a long time, been thinking about how to leverage the fact that, particularly for older adults, they'll be resistant to lots of people coming into their homes, but a firefighter is someone that's usually trusted, can get in. I'm delighted to hear that in addition to providing the care, there's going to be a survey to make sure other safety devices are functioning. So if there's a smoke detector, are the batteries up to date, things like that. That's been a long-standing desire of Commissioner Salzman to bundle these services. Mm-hmm. So the question I have for you is, assuming you're doing follow-up care for an older adult, and in the course of providing services, there is a concern about potential abuse and neglect.
Mm-hmm.
What will the training and protocol be in terms of some referral at that point?
Yeah, the training is in place. So we're mandatory reporters. We have actual names and faces of Adult Protective Services at the county level. That's where we loop in with, not an email, that's a phone call to an individual at Multnomah County that says, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I've experienced, what do you have to help us in that arena? So that'll be very much part of the portfolio, of that safety net, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
I have two quick questions. What is the qualifying criteria other than at risk for this program? Is it an age? Is it income? Other?
Yeah, it's a multiple of factors. We are letting the hospital determine the candidate for the program. It's voluntary, of course, but it will focus on those 3 diseases that are most likely to have a relapse, and that's congestive heart failure. It'll be asthma. It'll be someone who has diabetes. It'll be those kind of chronic illnesses, if you will. It won't be insurance related. It will be some of these folks have already relapsed 3 or 4 times, and this would be a different approach to take the care to their homes.
And my other question is, will patients who are homeless and being not released to a home where you can visit them be served through this program somehow?
I look to build on that in the future, having a destination, having a home that says, I will be at your location. Now, a home can mean many things to many people. It could actually be a shelter. I just need you to meet me somewhere tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
So we're looking more of a broader spectrum. The more mobile homeless might pose challenges. We have another program that we're kind of connecting high utilizers that way, and those individuals are being sought out regardless of, we will actually, quite frankly, look in a radius to try to find them. But this particular program, we need to set up scheduled appointments. That'll be a challenge.
Understood. Thank you. It's a wonderful program.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Is there any public testimony on this matter?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Good afternoon.
I'm Jay Wilkins, and I support these kind of things for the simple reason is if you have fire and rescue basically has equipment that they don't use unless there's a fire, it just sits there, they don't use it. This summer, 2016, I had an experience where some homeless guy was begging for money outside of a Dollar Tree on 82nd. And luckily, the fire department arrived about the same time the policeman or the county sheriff. And without that, the EMTs, especially a woman, came out and said, "Are you hungry? Or you feel okay?" And one of the women gave the guy some crackers. I was just waiting for the police to throw the guy on the ground, and that was it. So it softened up the situation, made it less confrontational. Again, you don't use nurses and you don't use fire department people at all unless there's a big fire. So why are they're just sitting there doing nothing? Certainly the fires have more priority. And actually, sadly enough, the person was, the county sheriffs did handcuff the guy, but it would have been a lot worse if the EMT, especially the woman EMT, had to sit there and was more maternal, asking me, "He's hungry, why is he there?" Actually, in doing that, it advertised to the people in the store why he was there in the first place.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. It snuck in there, the last few words of the Chief's testimony, that before Commissioner Udaley and Mayor Wheeler came to this council, we also initiated a pilot program because we know that some people are so distressed that they're highly reliant upon 911. And although it just got mentioned, we haven't heard any feedback, but I haven't seen anything come back to the council in the way of a report on the effectiveness of that. And I hope that we can see that in the best context, not just how much money does it save Legacy Emmanuel, but how do we grow that program so that there won't be another funeral like Miss Batt's funeral. And it was extremely important that Ms. Udaley raised the issue of who's being served. In reality, we don't know because it's reliant upon how the patient at the hospital describes their discharge situation. And if you're clear thinking when you go to the hospital, you just try and say whatever you think will get you the best care and the best outcome. So I hope that you'll be able to fully fund this program and that the chief will and the unionized staff will find a way to grow it so that we're getting the wisest expenditures of public dollars, whether they're healthcare dollars or emergency service dollars, so that we can have another Vision Zero. Occasionally there are irrecoverable situations where people's heart surgeries just don't work. But if we can grow this pilot program so that we have another kind of Vision Zero, where a year from now we're talking about in Portland, we have the lowest death rate for people discharged from the hospital anywhere in the United States. That is the goal of a program like this. It's an audacious goal, but I think it's the kind of things that you want to take on. And remember that we don't really know what the housing stability of these people are that they're going to be in this program. We certainly don't want anybody to be excluded and put at higher risk of death because they failed to say, I have a house instead of I don't have a house while they were doing their discharge planning. So that's going to be a very tricky issue with the number of houseless people we have here. And it's something that I, dealing with houseless community, I'm going to have to tell them, well, you might reduce your risk of death if you lie to your discharge person at the hospital and say that you live somewhere. So let's see if we can address that issue. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other public testimony on this matter? Is there any other comment from the council? Hearing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Fritz. Well, congratulations, Chief and Commissioner Saltzman. This is definitely another step forward. I will be looking for how do we do it efficiently with our current staff rather than starting a whole new service that we may or may not be the best to provide, but it's great to have this pilot. Thank you. Aye.
Fish.
Dan, congratulations on this, and Chief Burns, thank you for your presentation. I will generally support any proposal that goes upstream and provides cost-effective and compassionate care and that saves us money. And it's one of the reasons why in this budget cycle, I think we need to take a sharper look at funding permanent supportive housing units. The reality is the highest cost delivery system in the world is the current system, which is broken, providing healthcare services to people that don't have homes. When we marry homes and services, we not only give people a better quality of life, but we save a lot of money in high-cost, unnecessary services. Again, any program which goes upstream and provides compassionate care at a good value is something we should support. And I applaud you, Dan, for leveraging the fact that once a firefighter, trusted firefighter in uniform, is invited into someone's home, they can also do a survey to make sure other safety things are working in someone's home, which I think is a real benefit. Thanks for your leadership. Aye.
Saltzman.
I want to thank my colleagues. I think you all asked some really good questions. So I think these are all questions that we need to continue to ponder. This is a pilot program, so we're going to learn things as we do it. I want to thank Chief Burns for his commitment to this program and also Legacy Good Samaritan Hospital and both organizations' commitments to improving the well-being of our residents. And this is a good start. And I also want to thank the Firefighter Union for their willingness to go along with this as well. Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Oh, my turn? Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for bringing this forward. Chief Burns, thank you very much. I want to echo my colleagues' gratitude, and I'm very hopeful that this program actually works out. Anything we can do to get people the care they need without readmittance to the ER, I think is a great thing. So I look forward to seeing how this contract unfolds, and as I say, I hope there's a lot of success in the months ahead. So with that, the contract is approved. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. We're actually adjourned now until Thursday at 2 p.m. Thank you, everybody.